we live now?
Yep.
Interesting. Good evening and welcome to this evening's special meeting of the Cedar Falls City Council. I'll now call this meeting to order with a roll call from Madam Clerk.
Miller.
Here.
DeBoer.
Here.
Cruz.
Here.
Harding.
Here.
Dara.
Here.
Sires.
Here.
Tiber.
Here.
All members present, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The only item on tonight's agenda under new business is a resolution approving continued implementation of the public safety program or resolution approving immediate implementation of the public safety program, including reorganization of the public safety department. Is there a motion for one of these items?
Was there not a presentation that was coming with this?
I'll entertain the presentation after there's a motion.
Well, I'll make a motion for the resolution approving immediate implementation of the public safety program, including reorganization of the public safety department.
Okay, it's been moved.
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded. I will now ask for Director Olson to present a presentation explaining what immediate implementation of the public safety program would mean. Director Olson?
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I've got just a few slides to roll through. This will be considerably shorter than it was on Monday. On Monday, I did a rather lengthy presentation which explained in detail what the public safety model does when it was implemented and how it works for the city of Cedar Falls. So first, I just would like to run through, you saw this slide on Monday, but I'd just like to run through it briefly, the history. So we started cross-training in 2005. It was a paid-on-call program, which was cross-training police and firefighters. And then 2014, we modified this to a public safety officer program. It made more sense to have them responding from patrol cars to fire scenes instead of waiting and not responding from patrol cars when there's actual fires, instead of working the fire station waiting for calls to occur. In 2016, we moved forward with the public safety officer hiring process, in which it was mandatory that anyone hired in 2016 or later was public safety officers. There was agreements entered with the Teamsters Union that provides for doing this. So this next slide, I know it's difficult for you to see, but this is a slide of the past. Now there should be a past one here. Apparently that didn't make it, but there it is. The past, that if you back up a few years, you had completely separate departments. You had a police department and a fire department that didn't have any cross training involved. Currently, this is a current chart that shows a significant number of public safety officers that are working both police and fire shifts. It works very well for us at this point, increasing the number of responders to both police and fire calls. In fact, if you recall one of the slides I put together, and I'll show it here briefly, it increased the number of firefighters by 2 times. It's a more efficient use of employees, particularly during downtime. And if you remember on Monday, I gave you an extensive list of all those duties that could be used. All those duties that are done during the downtime to assist police from the fire shifts. Now this is the future. This is all public safety officers, is what we're proposing for the future. This is a similar org chart that I showed in goal setting in 2018, and then again in 2019 in a different document. And then I got another slide here. So if you'll notice, that was the 2017 goal setting report and a 2018 goal setting report. One of the items in there, one of the goals listed there, was continue the public safety staffing initiatives, continue to grow the PSO program, continue council support for aggressively moving forward with the PSO program. So these are documents that have been out for those 2 years. And then in 2019, there's also goals to expand the city's public safety officer model. And it said PSO program success may change the needs on the fire side, and that was a 2019 document. There's been also other documents in the past and goal setting sessions that have discussed the public safety model. So I want to do just a recap that we did Monday. We have more firefighters arriving at the fire scene, 2 times the number that we've had in the past. We have more police officers on the police shift with the same number of employees. We have firefighter PSOs helping with police duties during their downtime, leaving police officers on the street or doing report writing or other duties, which is a very efficient use of employees. In fact, we talked about that, and we had an extensive list that we talked about on Monday. This is a cost-saving model providing more service for less costs of separate departments. If you also remember, we had some testimonials from 4 different individuals at actual fire scenes that witnessed public safety officers coming to their fire, and they saw it and they said, wow, this really works. We witnessed that. Police officers rolling up, putting their gear on, fire trucks rolling up, putting fires out. We talked about that a little bit on Monday. So then here's a slide that shows the public safety officer firefighter training certification classes that we held. So in 2005, we started cross-training. In 2016, we moved ahead more to a different level with the public safety model. And you can see the number trained in 15, 17, 18, and 19 increased significantly. So if you back up even 2 years, you had significantly less than you have today. So what you're seeing today is what we see as a significant number able to assist on these fire calls when they occur immediately. If you can imagine where we'll be 5 years from now, we'll have even more, and the public safety officers of today will have 6, 7, or 8 years of experience, which is pretty significant. You saw this on Monday as well. This is a reminder of 4 or 6 fires that we had in 2019. Underneath the fire column, you typically had 6 or 7 or 8 firefighters responding in the fire trucks to the fire calls. That's all we've really ever had in the history of this department. With the public safety officers responding to these fires, you see anywhere from 5 to 16. You had a total of, and you can see the numbers there, 13, 23, 23, 15, 12, and 16 responding to that fire scene while they're working in emergency vehicles. So you saw some significant improvement in the number of firefighters arriving at those scenes. So the public safety model versus the traditional model. So to provide the same service response levels, the public safety model uses less staff than the traditional model. The traditional model would take 98 employees to do what we're doing today at a cost of $9.1 million annually. The public safety model would use 70 employees at a cost of $7.1 million. So this is 28 fewer employees, an annual cost differential of $2 million. So we're able to do significantly more with less employees than we are with more employees under a separate public safety traditional model. The public safety model versus the traditional model, again, fewer people in public safety delivering more efficient service with built-in personnel for future growth. So what that means is as the city grows, or if calls for service were to grow, because we have already increased the number of responders to police and fire calls, you won't see us requesting more police officers or firefighters for a significant period of time because we've already done that under this model. So throwing out a couple options here, the current practice, number 1, hire PSOs as employees retire or resign, or number 2 is a reorganization. Maintaining the fire supervisory positions so we can have them and use them for their expertise and eliminate a firefighter position. Now what we would like to do is assist those firefighters with other employment in the city so they can become a public safety officer or they can work elsewhere in the city. Now certainly they would need to qualify for that position, but we certainly want to make other employment available. But if a firefighter chooses to leave employment with the city, we offer a separation package of 6 months pay or 6 months health insurance. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Director Olson. With that, I will open up the floor to council questions. Does anyone have questions? Councilor Harding?
We still currently have police officers employed I'm not sure the number, somewhere between 5 and 7, I believe. What happens to the police officers, and why do they have to become PSOs too, and why were they not included in the last slide?
Well, the Teamsters Union, which is what the police officers belong to, they agreed to the public safety officer job classification. They agreed to moving to a 48-hour shift. There were some changes to their agreement that was made during the process of developing this public safety model. And their agreement does not allow us to require them to become public safety officers. But I will tell you, a majority of them have volunteered.
I have a follow-up question. If a police officer who doesn't wish to become a public safety officer in the future, if that happens, will they also, is the plan to offer them a 6-month severance as well, so they can pursue their work elsewhere?
Well, that's honestly a council decision. That's not one that I can make, but that's a possibility.
I'll ask, anyone else have a question first? Councilor Sires?
I have a couple of questions. Will you train all firefighters then to be police officers, if they're willing?
Yes.
And what is the cost of that? I've heard that's around $40,000 each.
No. They would have to go to the Iowa Law Enforcement Academy. That's about an $8,000 cost.
And then they'd be police officers just as big as our regular police officers?
Yes, they would.
Okay, it almost sounds like this is union busting, doesn't it? Where you are favoring one union over the other?
Let's have order, please.
Because you're actually giving the Teamsters over the firefighters union. Because that's what you have indicated, because you said you would leave the police officers only be police officers for those 7. Isn't there about 7 that aren't?
Well, there's actually 3. The others are supervisors.
Okay. How many, also,
Go ahead.
one follow-up. How many times are you going to allow the police officers who want to become PSOs, how many times can they fail that test? Do they just continue to take it and fail? Because I've heard there were a few that couldn't make it on a couple of attempts.
Which test is that?
Well, it's to take a police officer and then make them a firefighter. I believe you guys have tests for that.
Well, the only test there is the firefighter certification test. Is that?
Yes.
There's no entry-level test that you have to take.
So you can just automatically be an entry-level firefighter. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the state law does not require any entry-level test to be a firefighter.
But didn't you show us that manual and you told us that they had to pass those? They had to pass and then they were a firefighter 1?
That is correct, yes.
So how many times are the police officers allowed to take that test?
Well, they have a, there's a long story to that because the firefighter.
Order, please.
The state is who, I guess, supervises that process. And for a number of months, or a number of years perhaps, they were not scoring the tests. So the state stopped giving the tests. There's actually people that actually got arrested and charged criminally, and then they started the tests up again. There's significant trouble all over the state because there are some cities that have quit sending their firefighters to the state to take their tests until this problem has been resolved. We're continuing to send our individuals to that. Some pass the first time and some do not. There's 3 parts to that test. Some of them are having to take the test several times. And I said, so are the other firefighters elsewhere in the state, both volunteer and full-time. So what has happened is again, many fire departments are choosing not to send anyone to that state for that certification until this problem has been resolved. That certification is not required to be a firefighter in the state of Iowa.
What you're telling me is they're not required to pass any test to become a firefighter from a PSO.
We in Cedar Falls are requiring that Firefighter 1 certification. And then beyond that, we move into a Firefighter 2 certification, an EMT certification, and other certifications as they move along in the process. Most of that process would occur if they're a firefighter working the fire shift, but not necessarily the patrol shift. because, for example, they won't be pumping and operating if they're working a police shift. The firefighters or the PSOs working the fire trucks as work there now would be furthering those, like the EMT or the pump operator, that type of thing.
So I guess I'm confused. My question is, you allow police officers, since they've taken the police officer test, to automatically come right on duty and learn at that level? There's no test they take before that?
Well, they are required by the state to graduate from the academy within 1 year of their hire date. So that would be the standard for that. The PSO is not allowed to operate as a PSO until they have passed that firefighter 1 standard. So we have a standard for each side.
So you'll allow them to take that test until they pass, no matter how long it takes?
No, not necessarily.
Well, how many is it then?
Well, they have 3 years from their start date to become a PSO. And a lot of that depends on what we do. For example, are we going to send them to a fire class right away? Or are we going to send them to the academy and train, and a year later we have a fire class? It depends on what we do. But we will, as we would with any employee, try to help them succeed. But the problem we're having now is a statewide level.
But can't we get them certified right out of Hawkeye Tech? Or don't they come out as full-blown firefighters?
They still have to take that state certification. We could use Hawkeye, but we are internally we teach our own academy.
That's all, thank you.
Point of order, Mayor.
Yes.
Is there a process we can plan on here? Or council's going to have a
Explain.
discussion? Are we going to open this up to the public? I'm just wanting to understand what the process
Certainly,
is.
we will open it up to the public. I wanted to allow council an initial opportunity to have questions to Director Olson, which may circumvent some of the questions that might come up from the public. So I would allow hopefully a reasonable amount of time for questions from council first.
Sure.
Yep, thanks. Mr. Tiber?
I think, Director Olson, first of all, thank you for your leadership here. For some time now, I believe that we've been operating with there's 3 fire shifts total, right? And 2 of those shifts have been pretty much exclusively staffed with PSO firefighters. Could you explain maybe the balance? There was a slight, there was a strategic reshuffling of who's covering what shift. Could you explain how we arrived at that and then how it's working right now?
Certainly. So we have 3 fire shifts, and 2 of the shifts are primarily consisting of public safety officers. I think each one of them has 1 firefighter on that shift, and then there's different supervisors on each shift. Some are public safety supervisors, who are cross-trained supervisors, and some are the traditional fire supervisors. And then there's 1 fire shift that is strictly the traditional firefighters that are not cross-trained. And so I want to put this very delicately and respectfully, but we've had to try not to mix them too much because we've had some mistreatment of employees. So we try to handle that the best we can and lessen the opportunity for that to occur. The shifts that are primarily PSO have been operating over a year as strictly PSOs, and they've been doing a phenomenal job. In fact, if you do remember, we had that house fire not too long ago in which they saved a life. That was all public safety officers with the exception of 1 fire supervisor. And we've had some real good successes. We haven't had any significant problems with anything that they've done. I hope that answers your question.
So for over a year now, we've successfully operated with 2 shifts of public safety officers, primarily public safety officers.
Yes.
And 1 shift of full career firefighters.
Yes.
And you wouldn't notice there's no distinguishable difference between them and how they respond?
There is not.
Thank you.
Is Councilor Harding?
Could we pull up the slide with the traditional versus the PSO model by chance? Is that possible? It's before that. I just had a couple questions.
Sure.
I personally, I know this gets into philosophies of what people like. I personally prefer quality over quantity, but I do have some questions as to the slide said that we would have to have 98 people functioning, which is $2 million roughly more, and on the PSO model we would have 70. But I would like to know what the highest number we've had combined is in the past. I believe it's been around 80. And currently we have 76 or 78 employees, right? So I would like to understand why we're not comparing the numbers of what we have had to the numbers of what we currently have, so that we can really understand the true numbers. Because to the best of my knowledge, if we're saying that we would have to have 98 to equal 70, well, with all due respect, that hasn't been studied or proven.
Okay, so there's a lot of questions there. First of all, when you say quality over quantity, I agree, we want quality as well. But if you hire a new firefighter off the street, or you move a public safety officer over to a fire shift, you either have an individual with zero experience starting off the street, or you have a public safety officer with 1, 2, 3 years experience moving to the fire shift. So I think the quality is still there. If you move a public safety officer over and they become a full-time firefighter, you're going to get a quality employee. So we did have, I don't know if 80, we'd have to back up and look at it year by year by year, and as employees come and go. It may have been close to 80 that we had at one time. We were headed down to 70. Then about 2 years ago, we were having a lot of people resign. And so we bumped that up to 77. We hired 7 more because of the time it takes to hire and train, which is nearly a year. So we wanted to bump that number up in anticipation of others leaving. So in some of our financial documents, we've got goals reducing those numbers from 77 to lower as the years go on. And what we mean by that is, so if we have 7 firefighters responding to a fire today, and we have 2 less on a police shift than we have today, you have significant fewer responding to a calls. Under the public safety model, with the same number, 70, you have significantly more responding to both police and fire. But if we go back to the traditional system, we either fall back to maybe 7 firefighters and 2 less per police shift, or we spend at least $2 million more to bump those numbers up to maintain the numbers we have today with just 70. I hope I'm explaining that. Okay. So if you have 70 employees and they're not cross-trained, you're going to have 7 firefighters responding and X number of police officers responding. If you cross-train them, instead of having 7, you're going to see the numbers I had in the screen. You're going to have 12, 13, 14, 15 with the same number, and the police shifts are going to have a couple more people on them as well.
I understand.
So to jump fast forward under a traditional system, you need about 28 more people to maintain those numbers separate and traditional.
So I do understand what you're saying, but at the same time, it seems to me that we're deflating one number and inflating another to make the program look more positive. I still don't understand why we can't have a direct comparison of the 78 we have today, how much that costs, versus the 80 we have had in the past. And have we thoroughly looked at having a model that has possibly 30 full-time firefighters and 30 full-time police officers with a squad of possibly 20 PSOs, so that we always maintain the full-time firefighters here, and then we all have the police, and then we can still have more people responding to the scene. It seems that we're just really jumping the gun and just jumping to eliminating one side that we don't need to eliminate.
I'll ask for order in the overflow room, please.
So I guess this is why I was asking the other night that we table it and we really bring all sides to the discussion and see, because numbers can be spun a lot of different ways, and I really want to make sure that we make the best decision possible. So to me, we're overinflating one set of numbers and deflating the other set. So I have a lot more, but I'll let someone else go before I go more.
Councilor Query.
You mentioned with the public safety officer model that we have twice as many firefighters responding to calls, so we've doubled our service to the public. I'm wondering, is that the reason that we have an over expenditure in our line item budget for the fire department? I think we're about $200,000 over budget in that one line item, or is that something else? And if there is a reorganization, will that minimize that budget overture?
Well, we have We have an overtime, what I would call a problem. We have an overtime problem. It's caused by a couple of different reasons. One is the use of sick leave. The other is in the, there's some contractual obligations to allow people off, even where we're at minimum staffing, and that has raised our overtime costs significantly. So moving in further into the public safety model would probably reduce that by at least 200,000.
So the overture has nothing to do with increasing the help to the public by double with the public safety officer?
No, it is not.
Okay.
Mayor,
Councilor Miller?
in response to Mr. Harding's point, I guess the point I want to make there is that this isn't new. We didn't just decide this last year. I mean, to the chief's point, the reserve officers were back in 95 or 98?
95, I think.
You know, when the North Cedar station closed in 2010, those discussions that you're talking about, I'm almost positive they happened back then, and that has kind of led us to get here. And I guess the implication being this wasn't voted on by several different council members or several different councils or staff looking at all those numbers over the course of almost 20 years. So I think those questions have been answered, maybe not effectively for you today, but over the course of those 20 years, that conversation has been had numerous times by numerous councils to continue to stay the course with this program. So just wanted to clarify, or make my point, I guess.
Thank you, Councilmember Miller.
I'd like to,
Sir Darren?
Jeff, I want to move ahead to the option, to the last slide, the options. And under the reorganization that talks about maintaining fire supervisor position and assist firefighters with other employment, if it were ever possible to encourage the firefighters to work alongside PSOs, was there ever any consideration for allowing firefighters who have served the public for a long time, do great work, to allow them to continue to do that job while we work on a longer-term transition to full-time PSO, rather than displacing them or having them to have to look for another community to move to? Is there a way that we could work side by side until those people retire?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure if I completely understand what you're saying, but they can certainly become a public safety officer if that's what you're asking. And
I'm thinking more in terms of, even though they're not necessarily working well together right now, we're still a safe community. We're putting out fires, we're protecting people. To honor their service, if they were willing to work alongside PSOs, could we not just attrition, have them stay in those positions until it was time for them to retire? Or I know we're encouraging them, if they want to find another community, that's fine, but is that a possibility?
Well,
if they were willing to support the PSO model?
Well, it certainly is. We've reached out to the fire union many times and asked to conduct what we call labor management committee meetings. We've been doing that on the police side for years. We meet regularly with the police union and we discuss issues and problems, and it's a very successful way to meet and resolve problems. We've reached out many times. PERB was even going to come in and participate on a couple of different occasions, but that got canceled because the firefighter leadership chose not to meet under those PERB meeting standards, and so we've reached out many times to try to pull everybody together and work together on this.
Well, I'm kind of confused by this. I know it's maybe apples and oranges, but I've worked in other positions where my business chose to kind of change my role description, and my choice was to change with the role description or do something else. And I feel that's kind of the position we're in right now. As a city council, we've identified a model that we know works. We want to implement it, hopefully to save the taxpayers some money and also to keep us safe. So it seems incumbent upon our staff to fulfill that obligation. But at the same time, I think a good boss would allow people to leave gracefully, and if they could continue to work under the model they're working under while we've advanced the PSO model. So when they leave, we replace them with a PSO. I think that it seems more forgiving or more appropriate to allow something like that to happen. And I don't know if that's even doable, but I still would like to consider that.
Certainly. I mean, that's a definitely possibility. I think that's why we're here tonight.
Councilmember Harding.
To Councilor or Councilmember Miller's point, I don't have as deep of a history here as you, and I understand that. And I do know that these talks have gone on for a long time, and I respect that. My big issue and my big quandary is that it's always seemed to be that the PSOs were always going to be supplemental, and it's just until recently, within the last year, that all of a sudden there's this big push for full implementation, or what I will call full integration. And I think a lot of the issues that I've come across and things I don't like are the way that we've gone about implementing policy and the way that we've done it. I feel like as a council, we could open up and do a much better job personally. Director Olson said something that struck me at the last meeting on Monday. He said, collectively, we have to think together. And he's absolutely right. But the key word there is collectively. And we haven't been collectively together yet. I haven't seen that. I mean, again, I haven't been here since '95, but I've seen, Cedar Falls has a track record of greatness. We have great staff that does their homework, and they bring in studies. We do studies. We work with outside consulting firms. We try to do the best for our citizens. Everyone up here has good intentions, but we're overhauling a major sector of our city, and we've brought in 0 consultations. I know ISO is a thing, but that's more evaluating your preparedness based off records. But we've brought in 0 consultants, and we've not done any studies, and we've not collectively, as Director Olson said, come to the table and really discuss the merits and the issues of this program. So to me, it goes beyond this labor fight and this firefighter thing, and it goes to good governance and good democracy and making sure that we put the citizens first and make sure that we take our time and really go through and check every aspect of this, get second opinions, make sure it's right. There's multiple documents from the Department of Justice that have been published in conjunction with the University of Michigan that I've read that just focus on these issues. And so I would urge council to take our time and include everybody and definitely think collectively.
And Councilor Harding, I'll just caution you and also rest of council, for this part, as we're probably wrapping up on this, it's meant more for order in the courtroom, please. Thank you. As we go through this tonight, we have the discussion later for council, and that would be an appropriate time to give your sort of final points on it, and say for rest of council as well. Are there any other questions for staff from council before we move into public comment? Yes, Councilmember Miller?
Chief, somewhat to Councilman Harding's point, you've reached out to the union regarding this, and just for clarity's sake, the PERB board is Public Employee Relations Board.
Yes.
They sit in on these meetings.
Yes.
They will not allow them to be recorded, correct?
They will not allow public to be in. They will not allow them to be recorded. What they bring the parties in. They serve as a moderator. We work through with them until they say, you guys are doing well, we're going to back out. But what they do is you have minutes that both sides agree upon, and that is the public record, or the record for the departments. And that's how that operated. I know we've reached out, I believe, 8 different occasions to try to get some to try to get together and discuss and work through these issues, but we haven't had any success. They will not meet.
Is your office door open?
All the time.
Have you been approached by any union members? To come in and sit down and really discuss
I have
issues that are supposedly out there?
numerous people in every day talking about many different issues, but when it comes to this topic, I just occasionally fire supervisors will, but I just can't get anywhere with the others. And that's not meant to be a slam. It's just the honest truth.
No, and I don't take it to be a slam. I hope nobody else does. But my point in that is I had a conversation with a firefighter following the meeting on Monday. I asked specifically, have you been in to see Chief Olson? If these concerns are that valid in terms of safety, I have to believe either a Boswick or an Olson would be open to having these conversations. No, I haven't been in to talk to him. So this is my frustration in the collective coming together and having a conversation. If you can't have a conversation, there's going to be no collective, and we sit where we sit today.
Anyone else from council wishing to speak before we move to public comment?
I have some questions.
I'll allow it.
I have some PSO questions that I was emailed from someone in the public. First of all, the first question was, will all PSOs be required to obtain EMT certification?
Those that work the fire side, actually, there's several of them that have already received that certification. There are a few right now that are going through that certification. So the answer is we will strongly encourage it. So far they all have, but we cannot require that of either a firefighter or a PSO. In fact, not all the firefighters have been EMTs as well, but it's because we're not allowed to, according to the job classification, to force that upon them.
Okay. Do we know the cost of, do we have a rough cost of EMT certification per PSO if they choose to do it?
I don't know that off the top of my head. It's considerably less than an academy. I know that.
Will there be PSOs who obtain and maintain certifications for specialty rescues such as high-angle rope rescues?
So all the certifications that the traditional firefighters have received will be received by the PSOs, and many of them already have. I shouldn't say many, I should say some already have. So what we do is when they move to the fire shift, they're already firefighter 1 certified. A new hire from the street would not be, but they're already firefighter 1 certified, and then we require other certifications as time goes on, just like any firefighter. They're not being treated any differently than any other firefighter, whether you hire them off the street or you transfer to PSO. And one thing I think that is nice for us to do is if somebody wants to move to that fire position, whether it be someone from Public Works or police or anywhere else, mobility between positions within the city I think should be allowed. So you have several PSOs working the police shifts that say, hey, you know what, I want to move over to fire. And so I think that's a great thing to do. But the requirements are no different for the traditional firefighter or the PSO. They'll all be required to do that. But we'll once they move over, we've got some that have already achieved their firefighter 2 certification. We've got some that are going through that process. We've got some that have already gone to command school. We've got all sorts of schools that they've been going to and have already completed.
So it's a little bit at the will of the PSO to what certifications they want to get and how far they take it. We don't have any specific mandate of numbers that we would require 2 to be high-angle rope rescue, this many to be EMT, or have any sort of like org chart laid out that shows what certifications we as the safety department will require.
Yeah. So what we like to do is instead of sending 20 individuals to a rope rescue class, we may send 2 or 3 to become instructors, and then they'll teach all the others. it happens much more quickly, and it's much more cost-effective. So we do that in a lot of areas, both on the police and fire side. We teach our individuals to be instructors so they can come back and instruct.
Okay. Have we talked to the university and the Board of Regents about this possible change? And would there be anything that would have to be renegotiated in their contracts or anything that's stated in the contracts that would affect us making a change on this model due to the agreements we have with them?
Sure. We've talked to one of the vice presidents at the university. They're very aware and very supportive of what we're doing.
Okay. If we did switch over fully, would ISO just come back in 5 years, because I believe it's every 5 years, or would they have to come back again immediately to do it, or how does that work? Just out of curiosity.
Well, that would be up to them, but I'm assuming they won't be back for probably 4 more years.
Okay. Let's see. Anybody else got
I
questions?
just would like to add that ISO is very familiar with the public safety model because there's 100+ cities that do that, so they're very familiar. So when they came to do our ISO rating, we told them our public safety model across there, and they said, yeah, we know how that works.
Any other questions from, yes, Mr. Tuber?
One of my biggest concerns, at least as of late, has been, the allegations of the fire department being a hostile place to work in. And I think that we've dealt with some of that through a personnel issue. However, I mean, as we've moved forward, have you noticed a improvement in the environment in the fire station? Is there a morale boost? Are people behaving better, I guess, is the question.
No.
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 Yes, yeah, Councilor DeBreer.
And follow up on that question, is that why we have assigned the shifts the way that we have?
That is part of the reason, yes.
Any other questions from council? Councilor Tupper.
To follow up on that. I'm sorry, my heart kind of dropped there. People aren't working better together, and that compromises team. And, incident response, I assume, is all about team response. I guess I'm making an observation more than offering a question, but yeah, that's concerning. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, seeing none, I will now open up the proceedings for public comment. I will ask or direct all speakers to keep their comments civil and directed to me as the chair rather than towards any council member directly or to a staff member. I will seek to alternate between those in favor and opposed. And with that said, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand and I will call on you. Yes, Mr. Dix, you're welcome to come forward. However, you are not allowed to speak on any topic related to your employment. That, I would believe, would be everything in this case tonight.
How about the budget? How about figures?
Attorney
My name is
Rogers, I will ask for clarification on that.
My name is Scott Dix. I live at 7821 North Union Road, Janesville. I am the president of Cedar Falls Fire, Local 1366.
Can we get some clarification to your question?
From Attorney Rogers?
Without knowing the precise nature of the comments, I don't know exactly how any comments about the budget would relate to personnel matters. However, to the extent that budget funds all of the positions in the city, I would say it's probably related.
So I will not be allowed to speak about the public safety model and the information the city has put out at any point.
I believe that that's to me.
Is that correct? That I will not be able to speak whatsoever? I cannot show different figures that show what you've been told is not correct?
I'll read the requirements of our
Sure.
rules, and it says, however, to avoid violating adopted personnel policies, Iowa law, and Iowa collective bargaining laws, employees and collective bargaining groups will not be recognized to speak about employment-related issues during city council meetings. Employees and collective bargaining groups should utilize the processes specifically defined and granted by Iowa Code and adopted city personnel policies.
Granted, I will speak about a theoretical city. I would like to see...
No, that is not going to be acceptable
No,
because
it is
there's
not
no
gonna be
theoretical
acceptable.
city here tonight.
Theoretical city.
Point of order, Mayor.
Yes.
Is there, I don't know if you overlooked it, just for everybody's clarification, are you going to have a time limit on speakers this evening?
I would hope you would afford me slightly more, as it's my job you're cutting.
Please direct your speeches to me, please.
Yes, sir.
I will, it's a good point. I'm not going to allow your comments tonight, Mr. Dix.
I would like to
Because it's-
comment not about this, but about one thing, and it was about the comments that were made here about our discussion, that the city made a claim that they have offered several times to have me talk. A year ago, March, we sat down with Local 238.
This goes
Point
to
of
the
order.
collective bargaining topics, and
No,
you
it's
are out of order, sir.
I have offered several times to this council,
Point of order.
just several times to this council, to meet with them.
You are out of order again, sir. You will sit down.
Sorry to push here, Mayor, but
And I should note too, from the last meeting that we had, it was such a contentious period. There was a person from an employee group who spoke, and I did not call that out of order, and I apologize for that. So I'll now open it for someone who wishes to speak in favor of the PSO model. Is there someone wishing to speak in favor? Yes, sir, you. Name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, Jason Mayman, 1107 Eagle Ridge Road. All right. First time I heard about the PSO program, 2013, I believe it was. At the time, I was actually against it. Adamantly against it. Spoke with many members of this body about it. However, today, I am urging the same body to move forward with full implementation. It was a long journey. It became an obsession for me and a hobby to dig all the facts, ask everybody I could, and to come to this conclusion. Through my research, my own diligence, time, and frustrations, I changed my mind. It's pretty hard to do. I realized that the people of Cedar Falls elected the right people for the job. They made the right call. They had a mind-twisting decision to make with their back against the wall. They had to do something. And they chose correctly. Based on the data, the research, the economics, the finance, and the long-term health of this city. Wow, I say. That leadership is the kind of leadership I want running my city. Despite the activist lobby, despite my comments to many of you in opposition, despite the social media frenzy, despite the email barrages and the cutting down and everything, you had the leadership ability and the confidence to move forward. That's amazing. You listened to staff, you listened to the numbers, you reviewed it, and you voted otherwise for the betterment of the majority of the city and its long-term prosperity. Did I like it at the time? Nope. I was angered. But I come to realize why you made that decision. It took a long time. A lot of time most people don't have. That's why we elect you all to be in the know and to make those discerning decisions. Now, I do feel there were some missteps by the city through this process. Along the way, I think the public relations was horrible. I also think some things muddied the water in the rollout of the PSO program with a few departures of the fire department. Nevertheless, it does not discredit this PSO program or the purpose and the reason it was put into place to begin with. A no vote on full implementation is to deny the facts. It is to deny the financial realizations that put the program into motion. A no vote is proof that you do not have the best interest of the majority at heart when you are up there representing the city. A no vote on this program calls into question your discernment going forward on other major issues facing this city. The evidence is overwhelming for this program. Overwhelming. Now, with that said, I'd like to encourage the city, everyone on council, and the mayor to take every accommodation going forward with the fire department and their transition to the full PSO model. I would also try to recommend anyone within a short term of retirement be allowed to take full retirement in their exodus. And remind everyone that we are in the same city. And it's with a heavy heart that this decision is made. But it is a decision that has to be made, hopefully soon. PSOs are firefighters.
Mr.
We are
Mayor, you're out of
safe.
time.
Let's move on. Thanks.
Someone wishing to speak. It's Chief Trelka. I see your hand.
Thanks, Mayor. I've prepared notes so I can stay on task, and I appreciate this opportunity to speak. My address is 173 Raceline Boulevard in Waterloo, and I'm not here to disparage anyone. I would just like to make a few brief comments based upon my experience and my opinion. I was a law enforcement officer for 30 years. For several years, from 2011 to 2016, I was involved with the Waterloo Fire Rescue Department as the Safety Services Director. In that capacity, I was the department head for the fire department, and I was also responsible for appointing the fire chief. We studied the PSO model for use in Waterloo. We approached this study with an open mind. I would not have agreed to become Waterloo's Safety Services Director if I thought there was not merit in some form of consolidated services. In retrospect, the one thing I find interesting is even though I was in charge of the fire department, the logical way for me to operate and engage in the duties at the fire department was as if I was an administrative captain. I actually operated as if Chief Treeler was my boss and I wanted to serve him and see what he needed me to engage in for my duties. Part of the responsibilities that I took on in that subordinate role was conducting background investigations on potential firefighter candidates. Background investigations were my forte in my law enforcement career, so it seemed like it was a natural fit. Conducting background investigations on fire candidates versus police candidates was eye-opening. The personality traits of each was generally distinctly different. Think of the difference between someone who joins the Marines versus someone who joins the Coast Guard. Even the political views of each is distinctly different. Generally, law enforcement officers are at one end of the political spectrum, while firefighters are at the other end of the political spectrum. In addition, each discipline has a tremendous amount of perishable skills that need to be maintained. Being proficient in use of a firearm does not compensate for a lack of proficiency or knowledge in regarding confined space rescues. The amount of perishable skills that need to be maintained within each discipline is significant. I believe it is not humanly possible for one person to maintain competency in the required perishable skills of the two disciplines together. There is merit to the phrase, jack of all trades, master of none. I believe the PSO model could work in some communities. The threshold, based upon my experience, is in communities where there is relatively slow growth and the police infrequently respond to events of violence such as homicides. It should be noted that my marriage with the fire department ended in 2016. It was an amicable divorce. The powers to be felt that the marriage just wasn't working and that I needed to focus my attention fully on the police department. At that point, I myself had concluded that even this limited consolidation wasn't a good fit for our community. I've had many discussions with other police and fire professionals about the PSO model. Just this past week, I was discussing it with Waterloo retired Fire Chief Frank Magsamen. I refer to Frank as the grand old man of fire service in the Cedar Valley. I consider Frank a friend and a mentor. I asked him if I'm wrong in my belief about the PSO program. He told me I am not. My final concern is that of a Waterloo taxpayer. Due to mutual aid agreements, if Cedar Falls fully implements this program, I'm concerned that Waterloo taxpayers will end up subsidizing fire services in Cedar Falls. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Falco. Order, please. Order, please. Is there a next speaker who wishes to speak
Mayor,
in favor? Yeah.
Should we hold off on questions, or can we get a response to? The implication is pretty big that we're going to go to Waterloo and ask them for tax dollars to support our program. I guess I don't want to lose sight of that.
Right. Order, please, order. I will ask first, as a point of order, if you have a cell phone, please silence your cell phones before anything else. As a second point of order, I would ask you, sir, to please keep your sign down. Thank you. What are we at, the third point of order? Your question again?
I just don't want to lose sight. I mean, are you allowing questions now, or should we hold off till later?
I had considered that before, if we should just have those questions held to the end. I'll leave it for council. Is there a motion to allow questions directly now? Sounds like that's a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Moved, is it seconded? Second. Okay, motion and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so we'll allow that question now.
Chief, any comments regarding the implication?
Certainly. So we have had, as I discussed earlier, 2 fire shifts that are primarily PSOs for last year. In the last 3 years, we have asked for help from Waterloo Fire once, and we canceled them en route. In the last 3 years, Waterloo has asked help from us at a fire, and we assisted them. I do not see that, I don't see that being a problem at all. If you remember the chart I put up there, we have 12 to 20, I think it was 23 firefighters responding to fire calls currently. Those numbers will increase as we move this forward. I would say there's less chance of calling up on them with this model than there was the traditional model with fewer firefighters.
In regards to 2080 agreements, we've clarified this numerous times, but we've got them with, Waterloo has them, Cedar Falls has them, Janesville, Hudson, with all surrounding communities, correct?
Yes, we have 2080 agreements with I believe, every fire agency in the county. And I would like to add, too, I do not want this to become a divisive issue between the 2 cities. These 2 cities work great together, referring to Cedar Falls and Waterloo. We work great with their fire department, we work great with their police department, and the rest of the city does as well. So I do not want this to be misconstrued or for anything that we do here tonight to damage the relationship between the 2 cities.
Thank you.
Next speaker for public comment who wishes to speak in favor of the motion. So I will take the next opposed. So yes, ma'am, you. And I've already called on this man.
The lady behind you.
She was right behind you.
So yes, just simply because it's a next person in favor. So yes, my apologies.
My name's Kelly Dunn. I live at 915 Royal Drive, Cedar Falls. I'm here tonight to voice my support for our citizens, our city staff, our council, and our public safety officer program. I'm grateful to live and work in Cedar Falls in an innovative and progressive community. My husband is a Cedar Falls native. I've lived here since 1996, minus a brief stint living in Waterloo. We have 3 kids who attend Pete in Cedar Heights. I feel safe in our city. I trust that our first responders are trained to respond to anything my family and my friends who I care about might need in an emergency situation here in Cedar Falls. I trust that over the course of years, our staff and council have worked diligently to come up with a sustainable plan for public safety. I keep hearing that everything was so rushed to get to this point. I don't agree. I believe that this plan was implemented, I think I remember coming in 1995 and something was going on, but at least for the last 5 years, believe. This has been discussed at council meetings for at least the past year and a half, with Director Olson, staff, and council repeating the same information over and over and over. I watched from home. I listened to the concerns of the folks who were against the PSO program. I listened to the information provided by the city. What the city said made sense to me. I did not and do not believe there is some conspiracy by the council and the city staff to make citizens unsafe or to take out the fire department. The topic of safety comes up repeatedly. People say they don't feel safe. I feel safe when it comes to the topic of whether or not someone qualified will show up to my house or wherever I'm at to help if I needed. What I don't feel safe about is this toxic environment that we've created. Social media has good qualities, social media has bad qualities. I feel like misinformation is constantly regurgitated on these pages. I was added to those pages by friends. I think that's how it works. So for a while, I'd see the comments, and you know, I at first I was like, maybe I should listen. A lot of my friends are concerned. But then I just noticed it was constant hate, and no matter what information people were given, it's like if it wasn't their opinion, it was wrong. And we keep it going. And it's when the other night when it was brought up to have this meeting, there was a sigh of relief in my house. This is ridiculous. We've been talking about it over and over. It doesn't matter what we say. I do believe that the firefighters have had the opportunity to come to the table. I am pro-union, but I also believe, I'm not gonna go negative, but I want you to know that just because there are folks, and you know, we are citizens of the city. We see each other. Our kids go to school together. I'm not gonna bicker with people on social media or hopefully when I leave this room, but it is, I don't know, it's just such a toxic, I know there's people that feel like I do, because the last time I spoke, I had lots of good feedback. So I just hope that we all remember also that all of these people were elected by the citizens of Cedar Falls. And they didn't all agree on everything to begin with. I remember the last contentious subject, they didn't all agree on everything. But now look at the people that are still here. They agree on it. They've listened to it. I mean, I just beg you to, know that just because people aren't here doesn't mean that they don't believe the way I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dunn. Next speaker, yes, Ms. Lendick.
Tracy Salentic, 1008 Rockland Street. The lady that just spoke has the right to her opinion, but I think it's hurt feelings is what's going on here. And I think that some of the leadership that's in charge of the model has a lot to do with that, and the council. But I'm going to read what I have prepared. It says, Mayor, I'd like to know if any communication between the 4 council members that appointed the at-large council member happened prior to the appointed to his current position, promising him the nomination by Ward 1 Miller and the 4-2 council vote that won him his current at-large seat. If this indeed happened, is it legal? I ask because appointment was on 1/20. His first city council meeting was on February 3rd, and by the second council work session meeting on 2/17, he's fully on board with the 4 other council members and ready to full deployment of the PSO and lay off, fire, otherwise get rid of the fire department. This all seems too thought out and planned for him not to know about it before. Could this be why Ward 1 rep wanted to fill this seat ASAP by appointment rather than wait for a special vote stating that big decisions were coming and vote was needed, a supermajority vote was needed? This is an election year, and we're all tired of seeing all the promises being told to us by candidates. Ward 1, Ward 2, Ward 5, and Ward 3. If this was your campaign slogan, if you vote for us, we'll single-handedly dismantle and get rid of every single firefighter in the city of Cedar Falls, would you be sitting here today? I don't think you would be. Mayor Green, what now? Have you lost your veto power? Do we have a supermajority? Are we going to allow them to get rid of our firefighters? Mayor Green, some of these council members have absolutely no respect for you. I see it on their faces. I see it on TV when I watch the council meetings. If we're all about saving money, and I apologize to the two council members we actually want.
And please keep your comments directed to the chair.
I'm sorry.
Please.
If we really want to save money, I say each ward member start picking up the garbage in your ward. Get in the garbage truck.
Please keep your comments directed to the chair, please.
Get in the garbage truck. Start picking up the garbage in your wards. Mow the grass in the city areas in your wards in the summertime. Cross-train and take a job away from someone else. It's the in thing in Cedar Falls. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker for public comment, I will open for the in favor first. Yes, ma'am, in favor. And name and address for the record, please.
Thank you for letting me speak. My name's Jenny Leeper. I live at 1304 Washington Street, Cedar Falls. I'm here as our previous pro speaker, just saying, I do support the PSO model. I do encourage you to make a decision tonight. I think it is time to move on and kind of help our community move on and start to heal. I do believe, as a longtime resident, I've lived here 27 years, so if you haven't lived here as long, you maybe need to speak to the people who've spoken or who've lived here for decades. We have really researched this issue, and I believe it's very data-focused. I'm happy with our community and the decisions and leadership provided by our city leadership. I think it's important to remember that usually satisfaction does not lead to activism, it leads to apathy. So there are lots of people who don't come to a council meeting to tell you how much they love their community, how happy they are with your decisions. We present myself as someone who's very happy with our community. I trust our council to make data-driven decisions with the city staff for the benefit of the entire community, and that includes physical and financial health. These can be difficult decisions, but decisions should be based on fact, deliberative study, and proven success, not on emotion, misinformation, rhetoric, and agenda. There have been comments from community members the last several meetings noting lack of input, lack of transparency, and accusations of conspiracy. That has not been my experience as a Cedar Falls resident. I've had the opportunity to offer input on many decisions that were important to me through my time here. Sometimes I agreed with the outcome, and sometimes I did not, but I still had input and respected the service and willingness to serve of my elected officials. There was a recent election that did result in new council members, and I will just congratulate them. But I believe it's important to remember this does not negate the election of their fellow council members. I believe it's our responsibility as citizens to engage in civil and respectful discourse as everyone at the council table is making what they believe to be the best decisions for our community as a whole. They are our neighbors, they're our friends, they're our colleagues, and we should be able to disagree and disagree strongly without resorting to painting each other with negativity, unfounded accusations, and spite. I thank you all for your willingness to serve and make difficult data-driven decisions. I also encourage you to continue to be forward-thinking. And I want to say forward-thinking, because that's the leadership and vision that has resulted in a community in which I have chosen to raise my family, a community that I continue to make personal and professional investment in, and a community that I continue to choose to be a part of. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Lieber. Next speaker opposed, yes, ma'am, and yes, in the brown shirt this time.
I just have a very quick question.
And please name and address for the record first.
Emily Thode, 1710 Iowa Street. And my question is, with the schools being voted in, like to approve the schools that have the new high school, we had a vote. So I feel like this is, you keep talking about the taxpayers, and we're the taxpayers. Why don't we put it up to a city vote? I mean, has that been discussed? Have I missed that? I mean, seems like a pretty important decision for just you guys to make. Maybe it should be up to the city, the people of the city, right? We're the taxpayers. Make a special election vote and see where it goes.
Thank you, Ms. Vogt.
That's all. I mean, has that ever been discussed to make it?
Are you finished with your statement, or
I'm making
we
a
can
statement.
answer
I mean,
once you're
Is there
finished.
a possibility you can open it up to the taxpayers to vote on this subject? I'm not a very good speaker. Public speaking is not me, but I'm just curious.
Okay, thank you.
You keep talking about the taxpayers, that you're saving us money, but I think it should be up to us. That's all. Oh, and wait, Jenny Van
And
Doren.
I would ask, oh, is that your name?
No.
Okay, I'd ask not to bring up
Bring
other
somebody?
names, please.
Okay. Okay, I won't. Sorry, Jenny. Thanks.
Thank you. I will, since the question might be asked by other members of the public, this idea of a resolution or a referendum for this, can we hear from Mr. Gaines on that, or referring over to Mr. Rogers?
So I don't know the, Kevin may have to jump in here a little bit, but I don't know the law to the T here, but there's only a few things that that can actually go out to a referendum of the, and state statute requires that you, as the governing body, make those decisions. Kevin, if you want to.
Agree. This issue would not qualify for a referendum under state law.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker for public comment with preference towards someone in favor. In favor of the motion before us tonight.
There's a woman in the doorway.
Yes, ma'am. I'll wait for you to come forward. Thank you. And name and address for the record, please.
Hello, my name is Natalie Lang. I live at 2116 Southwick Avenue. I've grown up here all my life, and I've loved Cedar Falls with all my heart. But these past couple years has been sad to see as the division between the city, as I drive to school every day and see the signs saying we're for more firefighters, and just not okay. So I want to thank the city for making the hard decisions for our community, and especially the mayor and council. You have made the hard decisions that have impacted everybody who lives here, and I appreciate you for taking the time and exploring all the options. And for that, I want to thank you for serving and protecting for our PSOs. I feel safe, and I always have. So for that, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lane. Next speaker opposed, Mr. Saul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a fireman's kid.
Name and address for the record, please.
Craig Saul, 1925 West Green Hill Road, Cedar Falls.
Thank you, sir.
My dad was assistant fire marshal. My uncle was assistant fire chief. I had cousins on the fire department. I had cousins on the police department. And I want to go back to, there's a different mentality between a fireman and a policeman. A fireman is in to put out fires, save people's lives. Policeman, maybe protect people and crowd control. So it's a different mentality. I'd seen my cousin in Cedar Falls Police Department back in the day, said, there's a felon over there at the Sturgis Falls, just watch this. He said, I'm gonna go over there, I'm gonna put the cuffs on him, put the hands behind his back before he knew what happened. He had that mentality. Firemen don't have that mentality. They wanna save people and they wanna put out fires. And I know we've had no fires, but if I was in the, I don't feel safer now. If you and I had a big fire, I don't think we can handle it. I witnessed the Ben Franklin fire. I witnessed the Congregational Church fire right across from the street of my house. And with it freezing cold, the firemen were coming in our house with their buckles frozen shut and fighting that thing for 24 hours. And, you know, it's a situation where I don't feel safer. I think we still need to have our fire department. We have to have a good police department, and they're all friends of mine, and I grew up with them. But I grew up as a fireman's kid. I've been to the fires. I know what it's like. We haven't witnessed that. I mean, I'm an old guy, all right? I'm going to be 70 here, so I've seen this stuff. I've seen people injured. And local fire departments from other cities, they injured our guys because they weren't trained. My dad had to get hospitalized because he was up in a bucket. A local volunteer fireman from over in Parkersburg turned the fire hose on. He wasn't ready, wrenched his back over it. So they weren't well trained. So what I'm saying is, it's not about money, and we can save money all day long, but what's a life worth? When it comes to fire, your house is on fire, and I lost a classmate in a fire when I was a kid because of smoke inhalation. And we're going like, how'd that happen? So the thing is, the value in human life, and we talk about saving tax dollars and all that stuff, which is all budget. We got money for a lot of stuff in town, but I think safety should come first. And I think we need a good fire department, and we need a good police department, and I have nothing against PSOs getting cross-trained, but I don't think we have to give up the fire department and sacrifice our safety just to save a few bucks. All right? So that's my opinion on that, and I just want you to take it to heart that it's a different mentality. I mean, you signed up to be a police officer, you signed up to be a police officer. You signed up to be a fireman, you signed up to be a fireman. I mean, that's our mentality, and now we're being told, I want all you guys to sell insurance now, because you're like, wait a minute, that's not what I signed up for. So I think a lot of people are being forced to do something that they didn't sign up for, and they can volunteer. Like I was in the Air Force, and I volunteered for the nuclear biological chemical welfare team. When like a plane blew up with bombs on it, I'd go out there with those suits because I volunteered, but I wasn't told I had to do it. So anyway, please consider that. Thank you for your time, and council, I know it's tough decisions, but I think Cedar Falls deserves to have their own fire department. I grew up a fireman's kid, but also a policeman in the family. My brother-in-laws, law enforcement, nephews, everybody. So I've seen both sides, and they all have a different mentality, and they all have a different duty, and they have a different thought process, and they do a great job serving the city of Cedar Falls. So thank you, Chief, and everyone else. So
Thank you, Mr. Saul. Next speaker in favor of the proposed measure. Any in the hallway? Okay, seeing none, I'll go to next speaker opposed, and I will turn to you, ma'am. And name and address for the record, please.
Yes, my name, excuse me, I've got a little bit of a cold. Amy Miller, and I'm emotional about this. 1922 Pin Oak, I'm a Cedar Falls native. My father was on the council. I understand that you guys are using your personal time to give to the city, and I commend you for that. But there are many people that have lost confidence in many of you on this board and within the city. And I have a two-pronged question. First of all, that's been brought up about social media and the anger that is caused. I would like to know if there was, in fact, a gag order put on the fire department that they were not allowed to speak their concerns that was stated by Captain Burrow today on social media, because he is no longer employed by the city. He felt he could speak, and that gag order no longer applies to him. And I would like to know if that was truly put in place to our fire department, and why everyone feels that that's necessary. Anyone?
All right, thank you, Ms. Miller. Anything else for?
I do have another point. Okay. Earlier this, I'd say about 3 months ago, my mother lives out in the Western home, and she made a call to me and to 911 within a couple of minutes. I flew over there fully expecting not to have her there, and the ambulance already left. But no, I had to call 3 more times. Now the public safety building with all these trained professionals is 2 blocks away. No one could get in a police car and help when there was not an ambulance that didn't get there for 40 minutes. There's an issue, and it's about training. And that's what I have to say. Thank you for your time. And I would really like an answer about that gag order.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. I will ask, I believe it's a pertinent question for the discussions that have happened these last few weeks and months. To Director Olson, could you explain what prohibitions have been on firefighters and police officers for their speaking out in public in favor against the PSO model?
Certainly. So we, first of all, there's no gag order.
Order, please. I have heard that there is a gag order in place. Please hold your comments.
Okay.
Could you please elaborate
Yes,
what
I
those-
certainly can.
why that might be the case? That
Yes. Well, first of all, there's been plenty of comments by firefighters at council meetings, on social media, newspapers. So if we had a gag order, I think we would. I don't think that'd be occurring. So I think that's evidence, perhaps, that we don't have a gag order. But what we have, and this for police and fire, is the media. If it has to do with a particular incident, can talk to the supervisors, not the line level workers. And the reason we do that is we can't have 70 employees out there giving different sources of information who don't have the full idea of what happened at that particular scene. So you have supervisors that communicate to the media regularly on certain incidences that occur. But when it does come to any type of administrative or disciplinary action or anything that isn't scene related, they're to send it to one of the directors. And we do that for several reasons. We've had this happen in the past and we don't want it to happen in the future. We could give out misinformation. We could give out somebody's social security number. We could give out maybe somebody juvenile's address. And we have had mistakes like that made. And so we've tightened up some of those rules about what can be disseminated and what permission we need. We have some pretty tough guidelines that we need to meet from a legal standpoint, and we're just trying to do the right thing. So, I think the evidence is really obvious with all the information that has been flown out there from different employees. So, there's certainly not a gag order. And then, can I touch up on the Western Home?
Certainly.
I don't have any information on that, but I'd certainly like to research that. I will explain briefly how that works. First of all, it should never take 40 minutes, so I really do need to look into that. But if you make a call to dispatch, there's a matrix. Depending on the nature of the call, the computer matrix tells dispatch who to send to what calls. Do we send an ambulance? Do we send a fire truck? Do we send a police car? Do we send all of the above, or how many of each, or which particular vehicles, and that kind of thing? So that's how that works. But the primary medical paramedic service, ambulance service is Mercy One. They're not located in our building, so they wouldn't be responding from our building. But if the call did dictate a response from our building or from public safety in general, it would either be someone from our building or someone out in patrol. So if she wants to get me some information on that, I can certainly check into that.
Okay. And just to be clear then, are you saying that there's no document that any public safety personnel have to sign stating that they won't speak out against the PSO model or say anything negative about it?
That is correct.
Okay.
Mayor, another
Yes.
question. We've got a social media policy for everyone, for all employees throughout the city, correct?
That is.
It's not just police and fire.
That's right. There is a social media policy citywide, and it does govern some of what you say. For example, I really don't. I'm just speculating because it's not fresh in my head what it says. But you can't go out there and make false. Give false information and represent yourself as a city official. So I couldn't go out there and say, I'm the public safety director and I want to give you this information if that information is incorrect. But there is a policy that applies to the whole city. That's correct.
Right. Thank you, Councilor Miller. Yes, Councilor.
While I was campaigning, the one thing I did find is the firefighters, and I love them all, did not want to talk to me because they were afraid of retaliation. It was not any legality, but they didn't want to be seen talking to me, and this was during my campaign, and it was completely for the fear of retaliation, and that's what they did tell me.
Right.
That's all. Mayor?
Thank you, Councilmember Sires. Councilmember Miller.
To that point, I believe there was a video shot with the fire department. So how was that valid? When you were running for office, wasn't there a video next to a fire truck?
No, that was set up down on University Avenue, and my wife happened to drive by, and she said the big aerial is set up down here. So I quick grabbed a couple of cameras and my dog Jack, and we went over there and shot in front of it. It had nothing to do with the firemen nor the fire department, and I never talked to absolutely anyone there.
Thank you. Next speaker, or public comment. invite someone in favor first. Okay, and seeing none, I'll go with Mr. Frine. And I'll just caution you also, Mr. Frine, as a candidate, I assume you are, yeah, please come forward. Still a candidate for the seat ahead, not to speak about things directly related to the election.
Okay. TJ Frine, 1319 Austin Way. Just a quick question. Would it be appropriate to make sure that one of the council members can hear me on the phone? Nobody's asked for verification that he can even hear the conversation.
I can still hear.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Where do I begin? Okay. First of all, we're already fully implementing the public safety officer model, right? We haven't hired or even had a certified list of firefighters since at least 2016. So the question tonight is not full implementation. The question tonight is whether or not we're going to lay people off or reassign them, if you will. So that's the question before you. The question is not whether or not we're going to move forward. It is what it is. You guys have already made that decision. The question is, are we going to lay them off and replace them? The current practice is to do it through attrition. And I think another councilman member hit on that and said that he thought, as long as that was okay, that we would continue to do that. If we're fully going to implement things, we need to respect the amount of service these career firefighters, traditional firefighters have given to the city by laying them off or merely slapping them in the face. On topic of the $2 million in savings, to be very clear, we're not saving $2 million from where we were at before. Costs have risen. The claim is we're saving $2 million into the future. So it's been a common misconception and misunderstanding that we are saving $2 million from where we were at. We've almost doubled our staff, so there's no way you can be saving money. In my opinion, a 28E agreement, a mutual aid agreement, should never be a staffing model, and we shouldn't be relying on that. A couple of comments several months ago when the ISO rating was at risk. It doesn't matter. It's not used. It's obsolete. State Farm Insurance doesn't use it. It's old school. Nobody really looks at it. Now all of a sudden it's the greatest thing we've ever seen. So now it's a great model, great information. Oh my God, it's amazing. But that certainly wasn't the case when the number was at risk. The cost of I want to ask about the cost of the academy as well, because I know ILEA down in Camp Dodge and Johnson is having some significant issues, mainly housing, to the point where new hires have to live in apartments in downtown Des Moines, which can't be cheap. So the cost of the academy has probably risen. Again, the question before you tonight is whether or not we lay people off. It's not whether or not we fully implement this program. We haven't hired a firefighter since at least 2016. These guys have dedicated their lives to the city. We may personally not like them, but I work with a lot of people I personally don't like either. It's the nature of getting adults working together. But at the end of the day, everybody has the same common goal of safety and security in the city. So to say that we should just eliminate concerns by getting rid of people is a bad idea. Offering a severance package, did anybody put a cost on that? What that would entail? Or a cost on moving them to another department within the city? If they were to move to, I don't know, the Parks Department or something, what kind of cost increase are we going to have there? I would venture to guess it'd be significant. You're also asking them to switch pensions from municipal police and fire pension system to an hyper system. Another question is, if the probationary period for a new hire is 1 year, what happens if at year 3, if we ever run into a situation, what happens to that employee if they can't pass firefighter 1 or can't pass a public safety officer test? The other question was a litany or the list of things that a PSO can do on the off time, including PBT maintenance or calibration, which is done once a month, taser maintenance. The responsibility, in my experience, has always been on the individual with the equipment. And a lot of that stuff on that list requires very little time. For example, checking the accuracy on a PBT once a month takes about 10 seconds. Obviously, if there were some issues, there might be some more, but we're talking 10 seconds of time for each PBT. Or the taser maintenance, like I said, usually is only done when you download it after a deployment. So either we're having a lot of deployments, or again, we're talking very minimal time. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Bryan. I will ask for that question about severance costs. For Mr. Gaines, have we done any kind of like rough projections of what that might entail?
I don't think we have, just not knowing for all the employees what they would choose if for instance, they were transferred to a different department, or if they were moved went through with a PSO program, or if they chose a severance.
Thank you. And just as the second question about the failure to continue through a probationary period for a member, what the sort of consequences or difficulty might be for that. Director Olson, any statement on that?
Yeah, so state law indicates a 1-year probationary period for police employees. And in our contract with the Teamsters, they have 3 years in which to complete all of their police and fire training. I believe that's in the contract. Can I just hit upon a couple of those others?
Certainly.
Certainly. Okay, it indicated we had double staff, which we have not done. We're maintaining the same number, but we did increase just a few to hire ahead because we anticipated some individuals leaving. The academy is undergoing a remodel at this time. Now, that's why people are not actually at the academy, but I believe later this spring they're going to reopen, and they'll be attending that academy, and I don't believe there's any cost change associated with that.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker for public comment, I'll go with the in favor first. And okay, so opposed, Mr. Sharp. And again, caution as well about employee topics.
Everything I looked at doesn't apply to my contract or everything. So just call me out when I, thank you. Rick Sharp, 1623 Birch Street, Cedar Falls. It's a tough decision tonight. It's going to impact not only the firefighters, PSOs, but as well as everybody that lives, visits, and works in Cedar Falls. Obviously, I support option 1. Am I allowed to say that? Okay.
And again, this automatically gets into employment-related topics.
Thank you, sir. I was wondering who actually directs the department heads to make decisions such as this one.
Again, this gets into employment-related topics. I'll ask for opinion from Mr. Rogers.
It's about the code, sir.
I would agree with the mayor's decision on that. It's employment related.
Right. It's one thing, you'd had comments last week about fireworks and things that were not related to, it was the functioning of the city, which would be completely appropriate. But my sense, and council can overrule me on this, but looking at how the language is written, it's very broad of what is not allowed to be discussed by an employee.
Yes, sir. And this just regards your powers and duties, sir.
To my powers and duties.
That's what I'm going to read about. Can I expound on that, please? What I found?
It's not employment, so I would allow that.
Thank you, sir. I found in Cedar Falls Code and Ordinances, Chapter 2, regarding the mayor's powers and duties. It states, the mayor shall supervise all departments of the city and give direction to the department heads concerning the functions of the departments. The mayor shall have the power to examine all functions of the municipal departments and their records and to call for special reports from the department heads at any times. So to me, it sounds like Mayor Green is the supervisor of all the departments, and he should be giving direction to the department heads, which includes the public safety director, to not the council, concerning the functions of the department. So I was curious if was the council out of line a couple of days ago calling for we're going fully ahead. So I was just curious about that. I'd like to address, I believe there are some inaccurate statements made by the director that I feel we need to clear up. And I think a council member kind of referred to me from the last council meeting, and I'd like to have the opportunity to address that statement as well, sir.
You may begin.
Thank you, sir. when I discussed, I believe I was one the council member was talking to out in the hallway after the last meeting. I have talked to Director Olson and Chief Bostwick before about numerous issues. I'll talk to anybody, anywhere, anytime. But if I'm the person he was referring to, and he said I did, and the director and I, we just disagree on some issues. Also, the director made a comment that not all the firefighters are an EMT, and that is wrong, sir. We are all EMTs, if not paramedics. And back in the day, it used to be a job requirement on that. And then, can I just give you my opinion when I work with the PSOs, sir?
Unfortunately not, because
even if it's a positive one. I'm not trying to be funny, sir. I have had positive relationships working with them, sir. I just want to. I know there's a lot of negativity accusing us of stuff, and I want to say that we do have positive relationships, sir. And I just like to. I guess. I understand, sir.
Again, I just don't want to open up that.
No, I understand, sir. I just wanted to allow that we do have some positive relations. We do have, and I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. I will comment on the role of the mayor. 'Cause I feel like hopefully I'm qualified to speak on that topic. I have talked quite a bit with Mr. Gaines about that and with Attorney Rogers, because as I understand it, that the role of the mayor, what's listed in the ordinances, in my view, is somewhat vague, and it's something I would like to address during this council term, because as Mr. Sharp said, it states that I have the responsibility to, I have it all written out here in my secret mayor binder that maybe someday the public will get to see. But it states in here that it says, supervise departments and give direction, examine all functions of the municipal departments and their records, and call for special reports at any time. Within the administrator's responsibilities, it gives very similar guidance. That's in section 2218 of the code, where it says, direct and supervise administration of all departments except those provided by law. And so that's where I think there's some unclarity or lack of clarity of what administration entails. So I operate as a mayor, and I believe it's most appropriate for me to function as outside the day-to-day process of government, and that the administrator handles the day-to-day functioning of government. And that way, hopefully, it allows me to intercede when necessary, to take action on the side. But along with that, there's the role the council plays, and I believe it's fully appropriate for the council to do what it's doing here in terms of deciding what the future of any government service is. The administrator and the city staff are there to execute the city's policies, but it's not there to define what those city policies are. It serves as a recommending body to council through the mayor. And so I don't see from what Mr. Sharp had said, he questioned whether this was something that just I should be doing on my own, and I do not believe that at all. That would be a dictatorship in my mind. So I'll open it to the next speaker, and Mr. Selenik, I see your hand next.
Jeremy Selenik, 1008 Rockland Street. In reference to gag orders, anyone care to explain why on the November 5th, 2018 meeting, where we all showed up wearing red, the fire department was told not to be here or they would risk their jobs? Now, going back to special meetings, shortly before they called this special meeting last March, that they called at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when everybody was at work and couldn't show up to contest the change to a 24-hour shift, which we said was what was costing the city so much money. I would like to read the following. Proclamation of Teamsters Local 238 Executive Board on the retention of professional and career firefighters in Cedar Falls, Iowa. Whereas professional and career firefighters provide an essential and irreplaceable service to the lives of our families and neighbors in the Cedar Falls community, and whereas the lives and safety of Cedar Falls residents are better protected with a fire department that retains the expertise, experience, and services of career firefighters, and whereas the lives of and safety of public safety officers are better protected when they are working side by side with career firefighters, and whereas both firefighter and law enforcement officers train for years to become highly skilled and proficient in their specific skills and profession, and whereas both professions are uniquely different. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Executive Board of Teamsters Local 238 is calling on the City of Cedar Falls to retain professional and career firefighters to lead the department in the protection of lives and safety in the Cedar Falls community. And be it further resolved that it is the position of the Teamsters Local 238 Executive Board that public safety officers should be utilized to supplement and enhance the fire department by working side by side with professional and career firefighters, not as their replacements, but as a way to enhance the services currently provided by the professional and career firefighters. And be it further resolved that as the largest labor organization of law enforcement officers in the state of Iowa, Teamsters Local 238 is uniquely qualified and has responsibility and obligation to alert the public that, in our opinion, eliminating career firefighters poses a potential decrease in public safety standards, and pitting highly trained first responders against one another, boy, isn't that the truth, through the elimination of career firefighters further erodes the public safety. Proclaimed this 4th day of March 2019 on behalf of the Teamsters Local 238 Executive Board, Jesse Case, Secretary Treasurer, on behalf of Teamsters Local 238 Executive Board. Now, my wonderful wife, who likes to dig in and do a little research here, decided today she would call around to mayors of different communities because, as you may be aware of, your predecessor used to talk about how we were the envy of the state of Iowa. Now I can see that with our downtown and our beautiful parks and wonderful Sturgis Falls celebration. So I will read one response that she received. Tracy, in all honesty, Council Bluffs is sometimes insulated from many Iowa news events because we get most of our news through the Omaha media market. It was only a week to 10 days ago that I first learned of the Cedar Falls PSO controversy. Apparently, from what I was told, this controversy ultimately resulted in the election defeat of your mayor and several city council members. So I am now surprised to hear that the PSO initiative is actually continuing to move forward with a question mark. Council Bluffs is pleased and proud to be served by two distinctly separate groups of well-trained public safety professionals. In addition to saving citizens' lives and saving citizens' properties, I believe that there is an ancillary financial benefit that directly results from the results of public safety's work product that often goes unnoticed when city finance sits down to do the math. Of the cost-benefit analysis of employing public safety professionals, it's missed because that particular unrecognized financial consequence can't be found on your city's income statement. This additional benefit is related to each citizen's savings when they go to the private market to purchase their property insurance. Our residents and our businesses directly benefit through significantly reduced property insurance premium costs, a reduction that can be directly attributed to the fact that their lives and their properties are being protected by a professional fire department with a 2-rated ISO, soon to be 1.
Thank you, Mr. Slanik. Mr. Slanik, you're at time. I'll allow it. What?
And by the fact that they are served by a continuously trained professional police department that is determined and dedicated to reducing the occurrence of crimes and thus continuously improving on our city's associated crime statistics. If I was summing up last week's conversation, where I first heard about the Cedar Falls PSO initiative, I would tell you that it was a lunchtime conversation that was held between multiple mayors from various communities around Iowa. I could definitely tell you that never once that in that conversation was the word envy used in relation to the Cedar Falls PSO efforts. Matt Walsh, Mayor of Council Bluffs.
Thank you, Mr. Slennig. And I allowed that additional time as the presiding official, so it didn't require a second. Next speaker for public comment, I will...
Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
I believe Tiber.
Mr. Tiber? Thank you.
I'm just going to ask a question of Director Olson. That Teamsters letter, was that signed off by the PSOs in any way? And could you give us any more background on that? Was that a local effort?
Yeah, it was not a local effort. Jesse Case did call us, and he told us that he was going to put that letter together. He said he had been in contact with the International Association of Firefighters Union, and they'd had quite a bit of discussion. And they'd actually been down here, and we met with them and the International Association of Firefighters and discussed meetings, discussions, ways to come to resolution. Our local public safety officers or police officers there in the union didn't partake in this letter.
Thank you. Next speaker for public comment, allowing the four first. And now Ms. Pop. And name and address for the record, please, Ms. Pop.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. My name is Penny Pop. I live at 4805 South Main. I want to share a story with you tonight. In an imaginary city that could resemble Cedar Falls, a program is being developed to save taxpayers a boatload of money, cross-training. And it sounds like a great tool to utilize. In this imaginary city, for example, the city administrator was cross-trained with the garbage man. Now, I know this sounds a wee bit odd, but it worked in 100 other communities. The other communities had a clear plan, and it was changed and developed over time. Besides, he had no choice: cross-train or lose his job. As time went on, he knew that this might not work. His first love, being city administrator, had taken a back seat. And with no clear direction outlined by the city, and with a heavy heart, he decided to leave this wonderful place. And many followed in his path. This had an alarming effect on the city. Losses were heavy. The city did recognize some trends, though. The city did save a boatload of money. New folks filled these positions. But the city lost valuable employees. They lost experience. They lost a contributing member of their community at a time when other communities scramble for folks like these. Now, what did this imaginary city learn during the process? I'm afraid that ending is still unwritten, just like here. I am hoping that my city council recognizes that there is support for the program as well as opposition for the program. Because both sides exist, as you have heard tonight, my city council owes me and all of my neighbors a decision to effectively plan, discuss, debate, examine, educate, compromise, and modify the future of emergency services in Cedar Falls. Please be willing to come to the table with an open mind, not ready for a fight, but for the benefit of the place that we all call home. Please reject all motions tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Bob. Before we continue with the next speaker, Mr. Salentic, I'm going to have to ask you to remove your son, please. He's distracting to the deliberations tonight. Thank you. Next speaker, yes, ma'am. And name and address for the record, please.
My name is Linda Minicus, 1626 West Lone Tree Road, Cedar Falls. I'm here just to ask you to hold off on going any further with the possible firing of our firefighters. I think that you're moving ahead too fast on this. There's a lot of open discussion here that shows that your citizens still are not for this PSO 100%, and you'll never have that 100%, but you certainly need to clarify some of these questions that we have. I have been watching this for many years too, and I did not realize until Director Olson put up those slides Monday night that the PSO program was actually implemented in 2014. Now, there may have been many discussions, Mayor, prior to that, but with the way that the city council meeting had been set up prior to the new councilman, I'm just going to mention their name. Is that all right? No.
I prefer not.
To the new councilman and you, with the open discussions, people had a hard time following along with the packets that you guys read through and digest, and you move and you second, and you move and you second, and people haven't really understood some of the things that have gone on. I would like to see more open workshops. I think it's important for your citizens. I think it's something that we are interested in, and to have them televised. I also feel that you people have done a wonderful job in many different ways. However, on this particular problem, I think that we're moving ahead, like I said, too fast. I was very surprised at Monday's meeting when Director Olson said that in 2016, vacancies were filled with PSO only. I did not realize that, and I've been following this for a long time. And maybe it's because I don't understand the council meetings, as well as other people, but I had never picked up. I thought that this was still an implementation program that was supposed to assist firefighters and the police department, kind of bring it all together. I did not realize that it was replacing our firefighters. And to that, I need to say that if we're going to move forward, which may happen in the firing or redesigning of the actual firefighters, I think you need to owe these firefighters and their families and their children some respect here. You could be moving their kids out of this location, out of this city. I just don't think that's fair at all. And I do believe that there was one gentleman here that was a retired police chief, or chief of police, and I think that his comments should be taken very strongly. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Minicus. Next speaker for public comment. Yes, sir. And name and address for the record, please.
I'm Richard Hines, 1219 Western Avenue. I just kind of a woman said about the same thing I did. I said, we got a vacancy coming up on the council seat. Why can't we put this on for a vote so as none of you guys will have to make that decision? Like the citizens of Cedar Falls make that decision on if we want the PSO program or if we want our fire and police separate. stuff. There's another thing that I wanted. We need to do a study on these fire stations. I mean, we got the new public safety office out there on Green Hill Road, Main Street. And then we got the Main Street fire station that's about 3-4 miles apart. Why can't we do a study and open up our North Cedar fire station and maybe close the main one? Because the south public safety building should be able to do the downtown area and the southern part of Cedar Falls. And then we also need to look at maybe putting a fire station out west of town where all that new housing and stuff. There's $300,000 to $400,000 homes out there with no fire protection stuff. Another thing that was brought up by one of our chief Olson was that the new public safety building was built with funds from reserves on different departments and stuff. And if that was the case, why didn't you use it for fire and police purposes and services instead of getting rid of our fire department and all that? That's all I got to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hines. Next speaker for public comment. Yes, ma'am. The name and address for the record, please.
Paul Officials, 1327 Lake Ridge Drive. I'm speaking in favor of the PSO program. I was hidden back in the corner, so I wasn't seen. That's okay. I didn't prepare anything tonight. I'm not a public speaker. I don't claim to be and don't really even want to be up here, but I do think that you all deserve to know that I am in favor of the PSO program, that I support your decisions. I think that you have a, at best, thankless job, at best. So I take this opportunity to say thank you to all of you for the things that you do and for serving us and being our voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fischels. Next speaker on opposed. Yes, Mr. Salentic.
Joshua Salentic, 1008 Rockland Street, Cedar Falls. I have a news article that has a name. Can I say that name?
If it's in a public news article.
Okay. Mayor Green and Council, I have found this article about a current council member making huge decisions for our city that he has no right to make simply because his decisions on June 2nd, 2018.
I'm going to rule that out of order. Really? I think I know where this is going, and I question the appropriateness of including that here. Yeah.
Oh.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Okay, yes, sir, in the back. And name and address for the record, please.
My name is Brandon Flanzer, 613 Charismatic Lane, Iowa City, Iowa. I stand before you as a representative of the Iowa Professional Firefighters Association, representing over 1,600 professional firefighters across the state of Iowa. This is the only city that this is even being talked about. It is a direct, willful ignorance of the complete separation of duties and challenges that face us as professional police officers, professional firefighters. In fact, it is so different that states across the country have gone to the lengths of outlawing them, and the PSO program is not legal in multiple states across the country. You have to look no further than February 4th of this year, when Cedar Falls PSOs were asked to go mutual aid into the city of Waterloo to help with a fire. It is on written record, official document, that Cedar Falls PSOs were unable to and unwilling to complete the tasks assigned to them as firefighters. To do that and to continue with this program and to vote to lay off or fire firefighters is a direct slap in the face to their experience that they've committed to this community. And a willful vote in yes to this program is a gamble to the lives of the citizens of this community. And when a citizen is injured or killed, that blood will be on your hands. Thank you.
Yes, Director Olson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Response?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I would like to respond to that Courier article. So the Courier wrote an article based upon reading the Waterloo Fire Department report. They didn't talk to the battalion chief from Waterloo who wrote the report or to anybody from Cedar Falls. Somebody in public safety noticed that article and sent notice to us that that article was there. We read that article and we noted that that article was in error, that the report from Waterloo we believed was an error. We called the Courier, we discussed it with the Courier. So then we called over to the fire chief, Mr. Treelor, and expressed the fact that that article did indicate that our public safety officers, or it just said firefighters, did not do, I don't remember the exact verbiage, but did not do as they were asked to do. The fire chief investigated that, and they corrected that Waterloo fire report, and they sent the following to the Courier. Find attached the Maple Lanes fire report with highlighted correction. Cedar Falls Fire Crew 501 did make entry into the building and assisted with the hose line. The original report released this morning incorrectly stated that 501 did not make entry. So the Courier made an error there, didn't do any follow-up. The Waterloo Fire Department followed up and discovered that they were in error, and I am not by any means saying anything negative towards them. You have a battalion chief that's managing 50 people on a fire scene. It's difficult to know where they're all at. So we did talk to Treelor, and we actually had the mayor call us and talk to us about this matter as well. So that article is in error. We did everything that they wanted to. In fact, the fire chief did send a notice to us saying that to set the record straight, Cedar Falls Fire Rescue personnel perform duties on the scene in a professional and safe manner.
Thank
Mayor,
you. Yes, Councilmember Miller?
can we take a 5-minute recess?
Certainly. Is there, I guess there's a motion for a 5-minute recess?
I'd like to comment on that. You know, I read there are a lot of references about Alpha and Bravo, and if I read it, and you might be a little bit too politically correct, I think it was probably a deliberate error. And, you know, that's what I would say.
Order, please. Order, please.
If I may,
Councilmember
we're
Miller.
going to keep going. Wasn't there also another Facebook post regarding that event that we're talking about?
Yeah, there was a very lengthy Facebook post that made all sorts of accusations about what did or didn't occur. That Facebook post was sent to me, and I took that post and I went to the supervisor in charge of that fire shift that went to that fire, and he wrote down all the things that were accurate, or should say identify the things that were inaccurate in that Facebook post, which there was quite a bit. You know, unfortunately, we had a rather large fire in the county. We had a lot of fire departments work together and do their best to put that fire out. As far as I know, everybody at that fire scene, and our fire chief was there, as well as our firefighters and our fire commander. It went very well for everybody, and it's too bad people are exploiting that and making things up.
Sure.
I don't know how else to word it.
Yeah. We can talk later.
And Mr. Rogers, I'll just ask, is it a council action to call a short recess?
First, it's your decision as presiding officer, but on a request, you could sure say, let's take 5. If you refuse, council can overrule you.
Okay, well, on that note, I will call a 5-minute recess, and we will pick up again in 5.
there for a little while. That's why I didn't look back.
I will reconvene the hearing. We'll pull us out of recess in 30 seconds, so please take your seats.
Daryl, we will be coming back to open session here in a few seconds.
Okay. I was concerned. Nobody picked up the phone there.
Good evening. I am reconvening. We are still short of several council members.
I think they snuck out the back.
Sorry. I'm present, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Cruz. I heard you. Okay, so we have all of our council members, and I will pull us from recess now. Continuing on, we were in public comment, so I will invite another public speaker to come forward. And yes, ma'am, in the back. Name and address for the record, please.
My name is Mary Beth Bolts. I live at 610 West 6th Street in Cedar Falls.
And feel free to bring down the mic if you like.
Okay, I'll keep my comments short. My husband was a 30-year career firefighter with Waterloo Fire Rescue. He died in July of glioblastoma, the most common type of primary brain cancer. Glioblastoma or brain cancer is covered under the Code of Presumption in the Iowa legislature, and they are currently drawing up a bill that is going to be debated on the House floor soon that has to do with firefighters who succumb to these types of cancers, because although the cancer presumption law is there, it doesn't have any muscle at all. There's no compensation, there's no nothing. And what I see with this PSO program is I see a cavalier type of response to the dangers that firefighters face, and the cancers and the different conditions that happen because of firefighting. And I feel that that concern has been treated with aplomb. And I see these PSO people, chucking their gear in the trunk of their vehicles. I feel that there's not these safety measures in place, this high level of training of how to prevent, or at least maybe not prevent, but lessen the chance of firefighter death related to firefighting. So that is a big concern of mine with this program. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your comments, and I'm sorry for your loss. Next speaker for public comment, either for or against. Yes, Ms. Smith.
Never get used to being up here. Whitney Smith. I live on Neola Street in Cedar Falls. My notes are all over the place, so you'll just have to follow along. The PSO plan has been discussed over the years, and at no point was it mentioned that the end goal was to eliminate firefighters and go full PSO. It was not until Monday's meeting when Director Olson said this plan was implemented back in 2016. In 5 years, you will have your all PSO department. There are at least 6 to 7 firefighters that plan to retire in 5 years or resign. Please vote for option 1, or an option that allows those firefighters that plan to retire in 5 to 6 years to do so. This is their legacy. This is their career. They fought for this. They lived their lives for this, and who are we to take that away from them? If a firefighter decides to become a PSO, will they have 3 years to complete everything? I have a question. It was brought to my attention that when we resubmitted, or when the city resubmitted documentation to the ISO, that it was reported that the city has 3 operating fire stations. At the time that this stuff was submitted, we had 1. We had 1 fire station. we still do not have adequate response times for the fire trucks arriving. I'd like to ask the city, before you make any rash decisions, to bring in an independent agency to access the firefighter and PSO, or I'm sorry, to assess the firefighter and PSO program and the cost thereof. And since when is a paid union official not allowed to speak at a council meeting representing his membership? I'd like to know the data of the fire loss increase from the last 5 to 10 years. So property loss, I haven't seen a fire in Cedar Falls in years that has resulted in a house still standing. And to the last speaker's comments, did PSOs sign up for the increased cancer risk? Is that part of their union agreement? Is there compensation for them and their families? And also, we have access to Hawkeye Community College, where you are having EMTs and firefighters train there. Why aren't we bringing in those professionals for these PSOs? Why are we paying for them to do that? This is something that I know my husband, before he was hired, we paid for his paramedic school, for his EMT certification. He volunteered his time to get his firefighter 1 and firefighter 2. So when he got his job, the fire department did not have to pay for that. That was something that he brought with him, and most firefighters do, because this is such a highly desired position. They don't leave these jobs for no reason. I think that is all. I really do want to know tonight the answer to why ISO was told we have 3 fire stations, too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Before moving forward, there are 2 questions that we could gain information on. One being, we'd like to know from Director Olson if there's some clarification for the city's decision to provide training internally, or city paid for training rather than to take people who are pre-trained.
Well, actually, some of the hires have been pre-trained. They either worked at another fire department full-time, or they worked as a volunteer and were firefighter 1 certified there. So we have had some come on board that were already firefighter 1 certified. And then if I could answer the ISO with 3 stations, is that
Yes,
right?
please.
So when ISO came in, they knew exactly what we had, 3 stations. 1 was closed, 1 was under construction, and the other was open. So they know exactly what we had. There was no misinformation relayed there. And then a comment about no house is still standing. I can think of 3 fires in the last 3 months in which the fire was put out, the house is still standing, and will not be demolished. It'll just repair the area that was on fire that we put out.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, point of order.
Could I ask him a question also? I just want to ask,
yes.
How many PSOs are actually EMTs? How many PSOs are paramedics also? And how many are both?
I don't know offhand, I'd have to look, but that the PSOs working the police shift are not required to be EMTs.
No, I just wondered how many of all the PSOs.
I would have to look. I'm guessing maybe 7 or 8 working the fire shifts are PSOs, and the others would either be attending a class or will be soon.
But how many PSOs are EMTs and how many PSOs are paramedics? That's only my question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I believe they're all EMTs. I don't know if any are paramedics.
So no paramedics, but they're all EMT. All PSOs are also EMTs.
Sure, but we don't require a paramedic rating.
Well, that's all. Thank you.
Please don't interrupt.
Okay. We don't require a paramedic rating, and I believe we have, if you want to know the number of firefighters, traditional ones that are paramedics, I believe there's 1.
I didn't mean to interrupt him. That was all I needed. Thank you.
Certainly. Just for housekeeping,
Yeah.
if there is
Thank you.
a question from council members, feel free to just say Mr. Mayor, and I'll call on you. I'm sorry, I just didn't see you earlier. Yes, Councilor Harding?
Do we have a number of how many PSOs we've hired since 2016 that were already trained or already had a firefighter one as opposed to training in-house? And have we done any statistical analysis on what the cost would be of possibly not training in-house and having a certified hire list of firefighter one and EMT already trained?
So the cost to train inside would be cheaper than going outside, because you would probably send them to Hawkeye and then you'd have to pay for that class. And we have sent some to do that. In fact, we have one doing that now. EMT-wise, firefighter one-wise, we do most of that in-house because it'd be cheaper to do that. And we do a class of anywhere from 4 to 10 at a time. So that works out real well for us. When you hire most firefighters, it depends. A lot of people that apply for the firefighter job will not be firefighter one certified or EMTs. Some, if you get them maybe from a volunteer department, may, but for the most part, a lot of them have full-time jobs and are part-time in their community and don't want to come over. We would actually like to hire a lot of them, if they don't want to do it full-time, part-time, to come help us out on a part-time basis if they would desire to do that. But that's very hard to answer as to how many is going to be certified or not. But to teach it in-house, it doesn't make it that expensive.
Do we know if it's common practice for other public safety departments to hire firefighters that are, all come in certified or with certifications, or is it, each one individual? I'm just trying to get a scope on what other departments are doing as far as their new hires.
Yeah, it'd be difficult for me to say what other departments are doing, but I would imagine it's a mix. It's just like when you hire police officers. Some of them are already certified because they got certified somewhere else and are coming to your department, but many are not. It's just difficult to answer that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker for public comment. Yes, sir, you in the amazing John Deere hat.
Yes, my name is Dale Bull. I've had this discussion with John Cruz, and I've had this discussion with Mr. Brown.
Yes, sir. May I just have your name or address for the record, please?
Yeah, what my question is...
Yes, sir. Can I just get your address?
Is how many mayors and city council we're going to have maybe before you people will listen to us? I mean, we get this, is what we feel like is what we're talking to you people. We've got to stop and think that people of Cedar Falls want professional firefighters. We don't want part-time help. We want professional firefighters. They're two separate departments. Nobody seems to understand that. And my question to Mr. Olson is, how many firefighters, if he gets rid of them and only has PSOs, can fight a fire at John Deere's experimental farm, go up to you and I, go up 6 floors, and carry a fire extinguisher up there, or fire a hose, whatever? They've never done it. We've got to have professionals. And we need to have that. And when I talked to John, I thought he listened because I saved his life. When he lived with an apartment on 10th Street, my mother lived downstairs. They were having headaches. I put in a CO2 or carbon monoxide detector. She called me the next day and said, take that thing out. It won't shut up. And so I called the fire department, and they came out, and they cleared John and her out of that building, and they aired it. And the guy that owned the building was going to kick John out because he thought John called him. I told him I did it. And he didn't like that. But anyway, and I told Mr. Brown. I said, and I told John at the time, I said, John, I can't vote for you as long as Mr. Olson is in charge. I said, he's going to mess everything up. And he said, I don't see any problem with that. And I said, when you promoted him or got to put up with him, I said, you've got to stop and think. I told the same thing to Mr. Brown. I said, you do this and you're going to be a one-term mayor. And I'm telling you, councils, same thing, everything else. If you don't listen to the people of Cedar Falls, you're going to be looking for another job. Maybe you don't like this job. Maybe it's not worth it. And the other thing is, when you stop and think about that, professional firefighters are going to maintain the equipment. Mr. Olson thinks a person should not be sleeping on the job. He seems to think that they shouldn't have to worry about to hire somebody to take care of it, I guess. I don't know. But I don't know why he hates fire department, but evidently he does, because he's always against them. That's what bothers me.
I'm going to call that out of order.
Pardon?
The comment that he must hate the fire department.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry, but that's my personal opinion. I apologize if I upset anybody, but that's the way I feel, because we've got to keep them separate. And that's pretty much all I've got to say, and I thank you, and I hope that maybe we'll have a council again next year, but at least remember that most of the people in Cedar Falls want a firefighter. They don't want a part-time employee.
All right, thank you, sir, and thank you for the address. Could we get your...
Yeah, 3609 Clearview Drive, Dale Old. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
You got the right address. Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Next speaker for public comment.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilor.
Could I speak here? I want to clarify something that the speaker said there regarding the experience on campus. I had a chance to visit with the Vice President of Business Affairs on a couple occasions, and he verified to me that the fire crews have trained on campus 30 times in the last year, have had live hose drills throughout the buildings, so they're very familiar with all the buildings on campus, and that's part of the design of the training.
All right, thank you. Next speaker for public comment. Yes, sir, in the back. Name and mailing address for the record, please.
My name is Sam Brown, 19 Riverview Drive, Northeast Iowa City. I'm a former Iowa City firefighter. I worked part-time. I started off as a volunteer. When I started, in order to be a part-time firefighter, that's how you got your job as a full-time firefighter. And then we moved on from there. You had to be an EMT or have your EMT to move on up. In order to get on the certified hiring list, you had to take a physical ability test, and the test was done every 2 years or so. So every time that you wanted to get renewed on the list, you'd have to take a physical ability test. So I think I heard someone asking what type of test you would have to take to be a firefighter, and if you could pass that, that's one that I don't believe is being enforced anymore. I don't think that the council is being progressive in looking towards this PSO program. I think you're being short-sighted. I think the reason that there's only 100 or so other places that are doing this is not because you guys are the most progressive city council in America. It's because it doesn't work and it's not safe. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Yes, Ms. Reginald?
Sharon Reginald, Lilliput Lane. I'm going to have to correct Sam Brown back there because he said he was a volunteer with Iowa City Firefighter. He actually started out with Cedar Falls, and so his comments were regarding Cedar Falls and his progression through that. First of all, I want to thank you, Mr. Mayor, for letting this open dialogue happen. And I also want to say, I think with everything that has been said, the most important, the baseline thing that's going on here is that the administration is not listening. I think if you look around these chambers, if you look at the new faces in city government right now, the citizens are speaking and have spoken, and yet this administration seems to refuse to listen. They refuse to represent, and that's all we're really asking for right now. Instead, this administration has blamed the fire union for the failure or shortcomings of this program. They blame social media. If this program could stand on its own, they wouldn't have any reason to look for blame. The administration has claimed the PSO employee has been put in a bad light and looked down upon because of the fire union and social media. This administration has claimed that. And in retaliation to the firefighters for this, this administration has disciplined firefighters for very petty things. They've spent many tax dollars on crazy investigations, which resulted in grievances, which they said blame the firefighters for the grievances when they're only trying to defend themselves. And I also want to bring up, because of that, I've heard that firefighters, that this administration was looking for a firefighter that leaked out the Lockhart fire report, the one that I shared at one of the December council meetings. I'd just like to clear the air in front of everybody. That did not come through a firefighter. Those guys are too afraid right now of their shadow. That came directly from the office of, at that time, Mayor Brown. And I just want to be very clear. The fire union, we the people, social media, we have no problem with the PSO employee. Our problem is with the administration. In the council, having total disregard for our voice and taking our community down a path that we do not wish to go. I'd also like to comment on one of the slides that has been shared tonight about the PSO program. And if you want to put it up again, I'd be happy to. It was the PSO model versus the traditional model. I think this slide is a great representation of the misinformation this administration has chosen to put out there to further their agenda. To me, if you look at it, it's simple math. It says there's 98 employees, or 98, if the city decides to go traditional employees, 98 employees would cost $9.1 million, while 70 PSO employees is going to cost $7.1 million for our savings of $2 million. Using your numbers, if we look at what would 70 traditional police and fire employees cost, it's $6.5 million. So number for number employees, it's a savings. We can go even higher using your numbers. 80 traditional employees, police and fire, will cost $7.4 million. It's simple math. We can have 80 more employees than the 70 at the PSO model, and still it'll cost about the same amount. And the misinformation in this, I think, given to the general public, and I will say that when it was given, it was tried to be clarified, but I think it's easily construed. We've never had 98 traditional or public safety officer, yet this slide implies that. And in your summary section, we would have 28 fewer employees. In fact, 70 is right about the number we had when I first started. We had right at 30 firefighters and 40 police officers. Anyway, it seems like this is one of those numbers that is spun to make the PSO program look better. And this is just some of the misinformation that is being brought out and to sell this program. We the people aren't buying it, and we want our voices to be heard. And for that reason, we just ask that you just please stand down in this this decision tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reginald. Yes, Ms. DeBur?
Just a question. The 98 employees, isn't that the amount to maintain the service that we're getting with the PSOs? In other words, getting 15 people to the scene of a incident?
Yeah, to maintain the same response under the traditional model, you would have to add that number of employees, which is $2 million a year. If you just took the 70 and went back to the old model, you would have anywhere from 6 to 8 firefighters responding, and you'd have fewer on the police shift. So you would have less responding to the scenes than you do now. I don't know if it's appropriate for me to comment on a couple of other.
You may.
Thank you. First of all, it appears that I'm getting a lot of the blame for this. This model has been discussed since 2005 when we started doing cross-training, and changed from a POC to PSO because the POC model wasn't very efficient. And that was before I was a public safety director. So those things started before I was in this position. It's been through many mayors and many councils. I put the goals up from the last 3 years, which clearly indicates the direction that I've been given. Blamed firefighters for shortcomings. I don't know what shortcomings we're referring to. We do have 2 shifts that are PSOs for the last year and a half that are functioning very, very well. Retaliation for petty things which cause grievances. Yes, we've had about 45 grievances and complaints with Public Employer Relations Board, OSHA, Civil Service, City Council, District Court, FOIA requests, internal investigations, ISO, Iowa Public Relations Information Board. And we haven't lost any of those. So I would think that what we're doing must be appropriate. You know, I don't take the job lightly. I don't have an agenda. I'm a believer in the model. And many people, as I discussed on Monday, that come in with an open mind and look at the model, believe in the model, and say, wow, it does work now that I have some good information. In fact, I think our first speaker tonight indicated the same. He was vehemently against it, and after spending a lot of time talking about it and researching it, it worked out well. One last comment. Gosh, I don't remember if it was the last speaker's statement or not, but why are there only about 100 or more cities doing this? It's because of this battle, like I explained Monday. Kalamazoo, Michigan said this will be a battle. Many cities choose not to do it for that reason alone. And I certainly understand why they choose not to.
Yes, Councilor Harding?
I do have some issues with the slide with the 98, to maintain the same amount of service. It just seems that, again, it seems overinflated. There are other ways you could configure the numbers to get the same amount of service and still maintain a full fire department. So could we not maintain the same amount of service with 30 or 35 full-time firefighters and 30 full-time police officers and 20 PSOs? We could, and that would also still be cheaper. So I don't quite understand why we have to fully go into this whole thing. I mean, regardless of my, position on not necessarily wanting to, supporting the policy, I do see that, cross-training is not necessarily a bad thing, but I fail to see how we couldn't move the numbers around and still maintain a fully staffed fire.
Well, part of the, and we can certainly do that, but part of the problem with that is then you're going to have less people on the police side responding to police calls. You're also not going to have those efficiencies of those PSOs working the fire shift that allows those police officers to be out in the street. You're also, if you have fewer PSOs, you're going to have fewer PSOs responding to those fire calls, keeping those numbers as high as they are. So, there's all sorts of different configurations that we can do, but this one is, in the last 2 years in particular, those numbers keep increasing. The PSO gets another year under their belt, another year under the belt, and they become more proficient at the job. So it's not, I don't take it lightly. There are a lot of other options out there, but this is providing, as indicated on the slides, more service at less cost than a separate department, and it's working well for us.
Did we have, before, when we had separate departments, did we have any deficiencies in getting people to the scene and fighting fires, or any public safety issues?
Well, we had a lot more callbacks. And so when the fire departments, our fire department was sometimes even before they got to the scene, they were doing callbacks right away to get people from home coming in to help. So we had, I would say, at least 3 times or maybe more callbacks than we have currently, because the staffing wasn't what it needed to be. And now you're seeing considerably less callbacks because we have those calls immediately. But we also have those public safety officers getting to the scene first, like I showed the video with the CAF. I just thought that was a good example of the communication, the use of the CAF. We talked about the hydrant bag and getting that hydrant cap off and getting it flushed, and things that we're doing a little bit sooner. So there's a lot of advantages to the model, and that's I guess the reason why we've been moving that way for a number of years.
Next speaker for public comment. Yes, sir.
I'm Art Lupkus, 3227 Midway Drive. I went through this with Paul Hoffey and Jay Cole a number of years ago, and we looked at all the different models that was going on. And it really wasn't PSO stuff, but what we could do to lighten the load on the city as far as it was. And it all boiled down to is we tried volunteers, all different types of volunteers. They finally went with city employees, which was a farce. But anyway, none of it worked. You're better off with just straight firefighters and police officers. And what it takes to run a fire, and we always ran it with a minimum crew, so we had 10 people on shift. But when you have 10 people on shift, you got to count for holidays and all this good stuff, vacations. And normally you had 8 people on duty. Well, the city caught it down. Now what are we down to, 6 people on duty? Something like that. What are you going to do with 6 firefighters and 2 trucks? When I listened to your call that he outlined the other day, And I commend the officer that went in and got the guy out. That was all fine and dandy. But as I listened to what his diagnosis of the call was, they pulled up, they went to the front door, and the house was full of fire, and they knew they had a guy in. So they got a ladder and went up to the outside, and he kept saying he, I assume what you meant was the commander. Am I right?
Please direct it to
the one that went in?
Mr. Lepkus.
That's what I'm just trying to get some clarification. And the commander went inside and got the guy out. Now this leads me to believe that there was only 2 people there on the first truck. Now if you think that's efficient, you've got another thing coming. That's asinine. That's how people get killed. I mean, I went to a funeral of 5 firefighters in Keokuk because of a backdraft. And it's not pleasant. It's time for you guys to wake up. And that's all I got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Lepkus. Order, please. Next speaker. Yes, ma'am. And please name and address for the record. Okay.
My name's Nancy Moeller. I live at 1029 Barrington Drive, and I just moved to Cedar Falls about a year ago. So this is all kind of new to me. Like I said, I don't like to talk in front of people. So anyway, most of my questions have been answered on my little notes. I guess I still don't understand why we're paying to train them. My understanding like I heard before, that firefighters were already trained, they could come and apply for a job and off we go. So I guess I don't understand why we are training and paying for the PSOs. Why aren't they taking that on themselves to pay for themselves? Another thing, I kind of agree with what this gentleman said and a couple others. I don't know. I have a lot of common sense and a sixth sense, and so before I even heard all about this stuff, I'm kind of thinking, and I worked at the courthouse before too, and police and fire people, they're different as night and day, and their jobs are different as night and day. And to find someone that's going to come in and do both, I find that's going to be very difficult, because eventually they're going to figure out what they enjoy doing more and probably put a little bit more into whichever side they're doing. And I don't think that when you divide it like that, that you can do a good job. I think eventually they're going to fall short. I did listen to the video a little bit last night, and so you have, if they join, you have 1 year to decide if they're going to make it or break it, and you have a year to, if they're not up to standards, you could let them go. But then I hear down the road that it's a 3-year process. So how are you going to know if he's going through the police side and maybe doing very well, and he gets over to the fire side training and he doesn't do very well? Are we just stuck with him because it's past the year that you had to decide if he was going to stay on or not stay on? So maybe that needs to change to a 3-year after the training, or 2 years at least when they've had both sides of training. I'm not sure what goes on that 3rd year, because it sounded like 1 year police and 1 year firefighting. I guess personally I would like to see the 2 remain and have the center PSOs. I think it's great to do some, I mean, like with the hoses and the bags and doing that. If a police car happens to be in the area of the fire and they can get there and they can do that, or a PSO is sent out or whatever, and do that, I can see, the firemen, if they've got some downtime, no fires are happening, they have some downtime, they could maybe catch up on some jobs on the other side that need to be done. I think and they could get along a lot better together if they still had their separate entities and then help each other out. I think that would work a lot better. Just from my experience, you say nobody's gone to the supervisor. I mean, I wouldn't go to the supervisor. You learn pretty early on where the supervisor stands, and if you go in with a complaint or something, you know that's going to be put against you, and I think that's probably what has happened here. Anyway, I guess that's it. That's just my 2 cents. I've heard a lot of positive from the committee. I have not heard any negative. So evidently everything has worked perfectly and there's no downside to this PSO. And are we wasting our time being here, even talking? Is it already set in stone and is it already too late to turn back? Or would they admit that maybe things weren't good and just keep it going just because they don't want to have egg in their face? I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Muller. Councilor Hardy?
I have a question. One thing that I have a hard time understanding and getting over is just we have these overlays of what the program should be and what it should look like, and I think that's fantastic that you've brought that to us and showed us, you know, the CAF system and all these things. I mean, heck, if my garage was on fire and a police officer had a CAF system and put it out, I think it's a great idea. But why have we not, and we've talked about this a lot, and Council Member Miller has said that this has obviously been talked about a lot, but why have we not ever come to council or the people with something that looks like the budget, for example, that is just a detailed laid out plan? This is how many PSOs we're going to have. This is how it's going to function. This is who's going to have what certifications. This is how we're going to do this. This is how we're going to do this. I just go back to the fact that I feel like we haven't done our due diligence and homework on all this, and I'll go back to the budget because I've been studying it a lot, and it's huge. And every question I ask, there's a page where I can go, and Jennifer gets back to me here and here, and I feel like I'm just curious as why we don't have that for our public safety department as well.
Okay.
That's a question? Why don't, yeah.
You have that, okay.
I was asking Director Olson that.
Okay.
Or anyone else.
Director Olson, would you like to comment on that, or to Mr. Gaines? We'll start with you, Director
I guess
Olson.
I can just say that, so the only thing we've been asked to do, we put together I think it was about a 22-page report, which covered a lot of the public safety model and some of the training and some things of that sort. I have not been asked to do a report similar to that, but we've had a lot of discussions in goal setting, and actually every year in goal setting. I've done presentations in goal setting. I've done presentations in council, so we've discussed it significantly over the years, but none, I guess you could say none on paper like you're describing.
That makes sense.
Thank you. I apologize. It's just easier to ask a question about why something is happening rather than why something doesn't. So I wasn't sure if that was just a statement from you or something. No, I understand.
No, it was just a question as to why we have yet to solidify a detailed plan on paper that we can just turn to page 311 and say, here's the answer to your question. We have studied this program intimately and it's all completely laid out.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker who would like to come up. Yes, sir. And name and address for the record, please.
Rich Boson, 3219 Midway. First thing, what's the difference between the resolution approving continued implementation or the resolution for immediate? Both has the same ending, right? Everybody's going to be a PSO, the fire department's going to go bye-bye. That's the first question. Second question, supermajority, what's it take to override the veto of the mayor? How many?
And I'll answer after the
Well, I just wondered, could somebody tell me on that? Because if a supermajority consists of 5. You got 7 people. And if it's going to take 5 against 2 or 6 or 6 against 1, what's it take to takes 5? Okay, then why in the heck can't you people just let this thing lie for another month until after the next council person is chosen, instead of going with somebody that has been appointed and we already know which way that person lies? I just want to know why we can't wait for another month. What's the big rush now? And people say, oh, there's no rush, there's no rush. When this thing was implemented back in 2005, it was supplemental to the fire department and the police department, the guys I knew in the police department, because I was a cop in Waterloo for 30 plus years. The guys I knew up here, they went on there because they wanted to get some extra jing, some extra money. It was an easy way to get extra money because it was overtime. And all of a sudden it ballooned. Somebody here earlier, I don't even know which one of you guys said it was, they stay the course. The course has been changed dramatically. All I can say is, in the words that firefighters and PSOs and everybody else can understand, the accelerant's been thrown on the fire. We went from a few people in the police department to, holy crap, everybody's a PSO now. I do not agree with this. It was hard enough to be a cop full-time, let alone be a cop and a firefighter full-time. That's just crazy. Thank you.
Thank you. And I can answer for the supermajority. It would require, if it's 5-2, then a veto would not overrule.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. And the other question was related to the 2 motions under consideration tonight. I know those were part of the presentation, so I'll turn it back over to Director Olson. Just if you could give us a quick explanation of what the two differences are, because they do sound very similar.
Yeah. So the option 1 is the current practice, hiring PSOs as employees retire or resign, which would be what we're currently doing and have been doing since 2016. When we fill the fire shifts, PSOs volunteer to go over those fire shifts voluntarily. I guess that was the question from the person before. So I guess those are and then the difference between option 2 is that we move ahead with filling those fire positions with PSOs.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker for public comment. Yes, sir. And name and address for the record, please.
Troy Winters, 1517 West 12th Street. It seems like you guys there's one side and the other side. They're all against whatever the other one wants, the other one doesn't want. That's very obvious. You guys need to figure this out before it becomes a big issue. My question would be, it's pretty much about 90% implemented right now, the way the numbers look. Why isn't there not a savings, or is there data showing there is a savings currently over what it was, say, 3 years ago? That's my question.
I'll allow Director Olson to answer that if desired. Is that something you have any data?
Well, sometimes it's difficult to answer those questions without the budget in front of you. But again, I've answered it many times tonight. To maintain these numbers under a separate police and fire, to maintain these similar numbers would be $2 million more per year. Not only does this model provide those extra numbers and more efficient use of employees, but you won't see the Public Safety Department coming to council as the city grows or calls for service increase saying we need more people, because we've already done that. So I guess to provide the same service under the traditional method, we calculate as being $2 million, and I actually think that's on the low side, because if you have an average of 15 responders, I think we estimated fewer than that. And then so I guess that's the answer.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Burr?
What kind of tax increase would we need to be able to get that number? Do we have any idea?
Is that something we can answer, Mr. Gaines?
I don't think we have that right now.
Oh.
I don't, Jen.
Okay. Councilmember Miller?
To that point, we had 11 or 12 firefighters retire or leave the city several years ago.
Yes.
I'd argue that changed the direction of the program, and I don't think that's been mentioned tonight, everybody's going to say what the reason was or what not, but nonetheless, 12 people left the city. In order to continue providing service, you made the call to hire ahead. Council approved that.
That's correct.
So, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Councilor Harding?
I believe that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the budget of public safety has gone up 24.8% since 2017.
Okay,
I know there's some things that we can explain away due to hiring ahead and union negotiations, but I just want to, he was looking for a number, and I wanted to make sure that he had the number, because as a fiscally minded city, we should definitely pay attention to that. So
I think when that was brought up at a previous council meeting, we had talked about, I think that number was taking an actual and comparing it to a budget. And the reason why I say that is because, when you budget, you tend to budget conservatively from a standpoint, you assume someone's going to be here all year. An actual number might come in, and maybe they left after 9 months, and so it's kind of hard. To me, that's not necessarily apples to apples when you're comparing an actual year to a budget year. But setting that aside and looking at that is, you're right, we explained the one night that if you take the 7 that were hired ahead, that increase over those years was just under 12%. And so if you take that over, if it was a 3-year or 4-year, that's like a 3 to 4% increase, which is right in line with what our salary increases would have been. So I think that was the explanation we gave that one night, that really is the same one for tonight.
Thank you, Director Rodenbeck. Next person to comment for public comment. And you have one opportunity to speak. So, yes, ma'am.
Sherry Purdy, 134 Margin Court, Raymond, Iowa. I'm a little emotional, and I'm sorry about this. You are affecting my family, my husband. It's more than just safety. It's families that are affected. My husband has dedicated 22 years to this place as a firefighter. And you talk about the PSOs, the firefighters not getting along, and it's hostile. He's the only person on blue shift. He's trained the PSOs. He's the only one training those PSOs on his shift, and he's getting along with them. He likes them. They're friends. It is not the PSOs not getting along with the firefighters. It's the administration creating the hostile environment. I hope you know this is affecting families in the Cedar Valley, and it is a huge safety issue. Firefighters go into that job for the love of the job, for the safety of the people. Police officers do the same thing, and there are 2 different skill sets. We were told at the beginning of this that this PSO program was a supplementation of already full firefighting staffing. That has not happened, and you created a whole different PSO program that has affected our husbands. And some of you put them down in public or out in these speaking events, and you have no idea the anxiety that they have working in that environment because they cannot speak. And you can say all you want, but my husband loves his job and he enjoys the people he works with. That's why he's still here. But I find it asinine that he's training the guys that will be pushing him out of a job. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Purdy. That won't continue, please. Next speaker for public comment. Yes, ma'am.
Kathy Bingle, 311 Angie Drive, Cedar Falls. I just want to say tonight that this PSO program is the dumbest thing that I have ever heard of. It is absolutely a total lack of not only common sense, but it is a total irresponsible financial thing to do for our city. And Mayor Green, you and I had this conversation when I was helping you in your election, you knew exactly how I felt about this, that this has got to stop, and we have got to return to some common sense. And I'll tell you, the common denominator in this whole thing is two people. That is the common denominator with the problems in the fire department and the police department. And the two words that I hear are Boswick and Olson. And if you want to reorganize something and change things around, then you better start with management, please. And let's have an elimination of Mr. Olson, because he is the one that has created so many problems in this city with our fire department and our police department. So I would ask you and your council to take that under consideration. Let's start with the management before we move on with this ridiculous program. Another thing I'd like to say is a question. If a firefighter would choose to become a PSO, will they be allowed to take 3 years to complete their program? That's one question. Another question, why eliminate the firefighters? What does this accomplish? Why is bringing in 8 new PSOs to the fire side while firing 8 experienced firefighters to the preferred way to go? That is such an absolute lack of common sense. And number 3, as said earlier, there are a number of firefighters who are close to retirement. Why not let them finish their careers instead of getting rid of them? That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Bigelow. Next speaker for public comment.
I don't want to speak, but you can't answer whether it can be postponed or over.
You're out of order, sir.
No, I'm not. I just wanted an answer.
Sir, you're out of order. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Mandy Payton, 1118 Rocky Ridge Road. This is not my forte. I didn't plan on being here and speaking tonight, but sitting here and listening to this has just really, I just feel obligated to get up here and speak on behalf of the fire department and their families. Director Olson spoke on Monday as I watched at home about the morale of the department, something to the effect of the firefighters won't work with the PSOs. What does he expect at this point? Gag orders and threats of retaliation? Their fellow fire brothers and sisters have been investigated or grievances filed for things like looking at someone wrong or not saying good morning. Fire captains have been asked to falsify their reports or be terminated. Firefighters and their families have lost the sense of security in doing a job that they were trained and dedicated and that they have dedicated their lives to. Our professional firefighters are no longer confident that if they find themselves in a dangerous situation, they will have proper backup and get to go home to their families that night. This is due to the inadequate training and lack of experience of the PSOs on the fire scene. This administration has chased out and uprooted several great fire families from Cedar Falls with this experiment. Please don't put this morale issue on the firefighters. This is a management issue and a council issue. My second thing I wanted to talk about was that a councilman was voted out of his seat this last election and later directly appointed by the majority to temporarily fill that seat. A temporary council member should not be able to vote on something this detrimental to our community. I ask you to table this until after the citizens have a chance to vote a council person in on March 24th. We are the citizens, and you are supposed to be our voice. I want to thank our police officers. I know that they have taken a lot in all of this. They are so important. I have 2 little boys that look up to both the police officers and the firefighters, and I just hope that you guys can decide that this needs to be tabled and we could figure out some way to just supplement this PSO thing and still keep a fire department. Both separate departments are needed in a thriving city like Cedar Falls. Thanks.
All right, thank you. And I will give a statement for just a clarification of fact. Councilmember Tiber was not voted out of his seat. That was end of 2017, beginning of 2018. He chose not to run again. I ran in the open seat So I didn't defeat him for the council. He simply chose not to run again. So I think that's important to state that he wasn't defeated. Next speaker for public comment. Yes, sir, on the side.
So I'm on my third or fourth, maybe fifth draft. This is the shortest one because my legs are asleep but I can't feel my behind. I would like to start off with...
And sir, before you begin...
Oh, I'm sorry. 1109 Columbine,
and
Cedar
name,
Falls.
Sir?
Any name?
Oh, Sean Frederickson. 1109 Columbine, Cedar Falls, Iowa.
Thank you, Mr. Frederickson.
All right, I apologize. I knew that. I'd like to first thank the mayor, the council, the firefighters, the police officers, and the PSOs of this city. I haven't heard that enough to thank everyone. I was going to get into the difference between the citizens speaking and people not showing up in December. I'm going to skip that. Cedar Falls is, you know what? Cedar Falls does not have a police problem or a firefighter problem or a PSO problem. We have a teamwork problem. If something happens at my home, if something happens in an intersection, if something happens at an industrial business, teamwork is going to be the only thing, the most important thing for the group to be successful. In an emergency, we need for that group to be successful. So what we have to do to foster teamwork is what needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frederickson. Next speaker. Anyone wish to volunteer? Going once, going twice? Okay. Seeing no other public speakers, I will bring it back to council for discussion. And I'll start with Councilor Harding.
There's definitely a lot of issues here. You know, unions, laborers, debating the validity of the program, and all sorts of things. And there are definitely sides that people sit on, and some people are big proponents of the of this program, and I respect that. And some people, like myself, are not in favor of the program. But the bigger question for me is two questions. One, are we representing what we want, or are we representing what the people of Cedar Falls have said they want? And two, have we done our due diligence in studying the implementation and efficiency of this program as it pertains to only us? And I don't believe we have. I don't believe we have enough data. If I set aside my personal biases, which I try to do and try to be open-minded, I do not see the data and the homework and the studies and the evidence of how we've implemented it and how we've done this that make me feel confident. So I think that as a council, hopefully we can open our minds up to looking at representing what truly the people want and making sure that we feel confident that we've done our due diligence in how we've implemented and done this.
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember Miller?
I made the motion, and I fully understand the optics of what this looks like. I've sat for a long time. We on the council we don't have the option of speaking about union issues. So it's essentially been biting my tongue for a long while and not being able to talk, not being able to go out. And the optics of that make me look like I'm hiding something. Absolutely unfortunate, but it is one thing that our attorneys have recommended to us, that we don't get involved in union issues. This is clearly a union issue. Not union busting, as I've heard several things. I mean, if that was the case, we'd do away with every union in the city. So I don't believe it to be that. I don't feel like I've been able to talk or be open with the public as far as what my take is, what I know to be true. Right? This isn't a decision that anybody up here wants to make, but I felt it necessary to push the envelope and make this motion because it is a necessary decision for our community and for this department. We have to find a solution to this. We've talked about it for, I got on the council in 2014, and it's been an issue every year. We keep going, we hear about issues, we vet them, we go on social media, and we hear something else. I'm looking at a social media post from the Cedar Falls Safety Alliance. I think a lot of people are familiar with that. PSOs and their fear of fire, the Maple Lanes fire, and it goes on to state how PSOs aren't capable of doing their jobs. We let you know that some PSOs are afraid of heights, so they won't climb ladders. Some are claustrophobic. And there's a rebuttal from the shift, from a PSO, the shift supervisor at that time, going through and saying, this is not true. It's just not true. This is the frustrating part to me, is I'm looking for that truth all the time. And I get, earlier it was brought up, my OMB, I get that. I've given you guys a reason to question me in this or any decision I make up here, but I'm always looking for the truth. And what I know to be true here is that the folks that we've hired to be PSOs are going out every day, and they are put in situations that are challenging their safety. That, to me, is a problem. That should be a problem to everybody up here on this council, that we have a work environment that is not safe for a certain group of people. It's our job to create that work environment that everybody can thrive in, that everybody can do their best. To me, this is long overdue, because we've sat and listened to the antics, and we've watched the social media stuff that is not true. I follow this stuff. I can't comment on it, and I don't want to half the time. But every one of these comes back to, Chief, is this true? Where's the statement? What's the validity of this? It's not true. What am for me, I have to make a decision in that. So all of my constituents are seeing information out there that's not true. But what can I do? How do I keep up with that on social media? I don't, because I can't. I have a full-time job. Just like everybody else here, I want to get factual information out here. That's why I throw that softball to Olson during council meetings, because I don't know how else to get the facts out there, and all I can do is try. This is what I know to be true. We have a situation right now where everybody's safety is endangered because these two groups of people won't work together. Unfortunate, but that is a decision that people have made. We just had a grievance hearing with the union president where 8 people came forward and said, this is a harassing condition. And I will not believe that Chief Olson...
Mr. Mayor, we really shouldn't get into personnel matters as we go through this process.
Even from a public available discussion?
Wasn't that made public?
It was public, my bad.
If it had been a private, then yeah, I would have ruled it out.
I apologize, Council.
Union president with 8 people coming forward saying there is a harassing condition here. I just got an email last night from another shift supervisor where our PSOs are called cross-dressers. Kind of fun, huh? I don't think that is a situation at all that I want a city employee being put in. And it is my responsibility as a council person to do something about that. So yes, I made this motion and I understand the optics of it, but I will not sit around and not do anything about this any longer. It is unfortunate that that situation starts at the top with our union president and that trickles down. And if you don't think that trickles down from there, I'm going to say you're wrong, because it does. Obviously, super passionate about this. I want the truth in every one of these situations, and if I'm wrong, I will sit in my ignorance in this. These two groups of people will not work together. There is no good way forward in this, and it is a horrible situation for everybody up here to sit in. The reason I was talking about somebody going in and having a personal conversation with Chief Olson, because if these situations are that serious, why are we not doing it? And I don't buy the gag order. I don't buy the whatever it keeps getting said out there, that you can't talk to people. No, if there is a situation that is that dangerous, we can be doing something about it. But again, not the truth. I hate this situation.
Councilmember DeBeer.
I think to that, I just want to add that regardless of what department it is, every department in the city, that every employee within the city should have the right to work in a harassment-free work zone. Just wanted to add that.
Councilor Sires.
I've got a few things I've jotted down here. I want to thank everybody for being here and voicing their opinion, whether it was on the PSO side or was on the firefighter side. It reminds me of when my kids and I were in Colorado and went to the Avalanche game against the Blackhawks. I'll tell you what, we were the only Blackhawks fan in there in the good section that we got. But everybody treated us decent when we left, and everything was good, and I know that everybody will treat everyone else decent, because the thing about it is, we all love Cedar Falls together. Some of us see it one way, some of us see it the other. Now, I had brought a book here to read to everybody for the next 24 hours if I needed to, but our good mayor said he would not let a filibuster go through. So,
Councilor Sires, I just want to, please, this is my order.
Exactly.
I just want to clarify to the public that a filibuster is not allowed in our council rules. So those antics are just not allowed. I'll turn it back over to Councilor Sires.
Yes. So anyway, you guys are going to miss out on my kids' favorite book. That was the only thing I was going to say about that. But I figured if I protested any harder and got thrown out of here, and I have been thrown out of places before, we wouldn't have the chance for a veto. So I'm not going to take that chance. Now, my uncle was a firefighter for Waterloo, and I believe it was close to 50 years, and I don't know which side it was. But one of the most important things I learned from him was the prevention of fires. And he went and spoke to Boy Scout groups. He talked to everybody. I remember being at the one that he did for the 4-H. And to this day, when I go into a motel room, I leave my key or my key card right beside the door, because he always said, go to the door, feel if it's hot. If you go out in the hall, make sure you have your card, so it was keys back then, keys so you can get back in. He said, always make sure you know where the exit is, so when you get outside, you can find your way out and never use an elevator. So these are the things that a firefighter teaches us. It's not cleaning guns, because he could have cleaned guns. He was in the Korean War. And those are some things, and I remember the learn not to burn, and so on, and I loved my uncle. But I'm committed to have two separate departments. I ran on that. I'm going to fight for that. And my wife, who we met our first day of kindergarten, and we're still together, she started a political action committee, and she hired a lobbyist. And she's going to work at the state level, and we're going to try and work at the state level so things like this don't happen. So we're going to work across the aisle with Democrats who are unions and with Republicans. So we're going to try and get some of these things resolved that way. So I just want to tell you, I'm set in my convictions, and you guys aren't going to get to read Robin Hood with me, but you can always come into my house, and I'm glad to, because that was my favorite one. I read all the classics to my kids. And thank you very much for coming out, and thank you for your convictions. And thanks to the people on the council that have worked hard through all these things. Whether we agree or we don't agree, we're all here together, and we all love Cedar Falls. And that's all I have to say.
Yes, Councilor Miller.
Chief Olson, we haven't discussed this yet, but say this does go through, are we safe as a community? Do we have the staffing to?
Yes, we do.
Order, please.
Yes, we do?
Yeah, yes, we do.
You're comfortable with that?
Yes.
Councilmember Tiber.
I wanted a little bit more clarity on the motion itself, because I think that there might be some misconceptions here where this is like an immediate termination of the fire department. I don't believe it's that at all. I think what you presented here was something very different and multiple paths. I mean, in fact, it almost sounds like it could be, it will never be viewed this way by some, but it seems like it's the best option forward, mainly because we preserve paths for
career firefighters to enhance skills and continue to be a part of our fire and public safety operations, or willingly depart as well. So if you would just describe some of the positions and maybe some of the career paths that could be offered going forward.
Yeah, certainly. So I would certainly like to see many of them trained as public safety officers. They would stay within the public safety department. They would, now there are, and I have to say that there are state laws that do regulate the testing process. So there's some of the testing process they do have to go through. So we'd have to do that. So I would certainly invite them to and would like them to do that. If they choose not to do that, there are other positions within the city that I'm sure they qualify for, that they could, again, there are civil service testing, so there are some, it's just not a easy transfer like we wish it was. So I just have to clarify that, but there are some other options within the city for them.
Thank you.
Councilor Harding.
Let's say everything goes through. What's the timeline on that? Are we going to release something that gives them all the information in a packet written down so they can access everything and know everything? Because it seems like it's just going to cause a lot of questions.
Certainly would. There's a lot of questions to be answered, and I quite honestly would defer to the attorneys on that, because there are certain legal timelines and restrictions depending on what you're doing, but there will certainly be enough information given to them for them to help them make decisions properly. It's not a speedy timeline.
Did we ever answer the question about if they will have the 3 years that, like entering the program, how that you want them to complete training within 3 years? Is that, I know a couple people asked that, and I don't remember hearing the final answer on that.
Okay.
Please.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think we ever got to that answer. Or I did answer that a little bit, but I don't think it's real clear, because it's not. So we talk about 1 year and 3 years. State law gives you a 1 year probation, which is different than what, for example, the Iowa Law Enforcement Academy says. They say within 1 year of getting hired as a police officer, you have to go through the academy. We have I'm trying to recollect, I believe it's in our job classification that it says you have 3 years to complete your training. Now, that training could either be police or fire training, depending on where we start you out at. And the reason we put that in there is because we didn't want someone to come on board and say, oh, I'll do it, and 10 years later they still haven't done it. So we put a 3-year limit on there. And I can't remember if that was I don't think it was a contractual obligation with the union. I think it was in a job class. I'm just not clear on that. So, they would have at least 1 year to do that, complete that police portion of that. And again, I just want to clarify that I would want to run everything through the attorneys and make sure we're doing everything the appropriate way, but I'm fairly certain on most of that.
Thank you. Councilor Miller? Excuse me, Councilmember Miller?
I got that out. Boy, I've been thinking about this all day. These decisions are incredible. I wanted to clarify with everybody, whether firefighter, police officer, PSO, I absolutely appreciate everybody's service in this city for any number of years. And we can debate that all we want, but I appreciate that for any citizen in our community. I think we're always trying to make the right decision moving forward, and there's clearly disagreements on what that is. No matter which way this goes, I think we have to keep lines of communication open, and we need to continue discussing this moving forward, because there's plenty of questions out there as to, well, what's the truth? So I guess at this point, I'd like to see an amendment to this to create some kind of a task force moving forward to keep talking about this, and whether that's made up, and I guess I want to be kind of specific with that. We've got at least 2 different opinions about this program on the council, so let's pick let's pick 2 people from the council. Let's get 2 residents. Let's get 2 people from 2 PSOs, and let's get 2 fire supervisors, or whatever the case may be, to continue the conversation here. It needs to happen. I do think a decision has to be made, but I don't want to disregard all your folks' concerns in any way, but I do think that we have to make a decision on this and move it forward.
Councilor Dare?
Thank you. I concur that I want to express my appreciation for everybody being here tonight, as uncomfortable as it is for us. I know how frustrating and disappointed you folks are in some of us. I will say that I am still, I'm starting my statement with I'm still fully committed to implementing the PSO model. There's been a lot of talk about lack of transparency, or this is all new to us, and you all know that easily 4 to 6 years there's been ongoing discussion about this model. Like many of you, I started out with a lot of misconceptions myself, a lot of hesitancy in it, but after visiting several communities and hearing from communities that have had success with it, I've learned to appreciate it, and I believe it's something that's appropriate for our community. And I would say that a couple recent events have convinced me even more that the PSO people are capable of providing this service with support, direction, and camaraderie from other firefighters. I think that's the thing that's been missing, and maybe it sounds like it could be a two-way street, but all along there's been a question from the opponents saying we don't feel safe because these people don't have experience. No, they don't, but neither did any firefighter when they started. Every PSO starts with the same training, I believe, that firefighters start with. I'm telling you what I believe, okay? And okay? A lot of head shaking. So obviously with this group I'm wrong, but I try to imagine, I said this the other night, why would anybody want to be a PSO when they know that there's every time they look at a city council meeting, the room is full of people that don't trust them. These are mature men and women who are committed every bit as much as firefighters are, who I have nothing but the utmost respect for. One of my good friends over here is a firefighter, and he's probably not very happy with me. But I wouldn't want his job. I fully respect what they do. But it doesn't mean just because you don't have the title that you can't do the job. And I'm convinced that the PSOs have proven they can. And you can't tell me that 2 months ago, when 2 PSOs got on top of a roof and saved a 34-year-old handicapped individual from a fire, that they're not brave, they're not skilled, they're not qualified. That same night that they were praised for what they did, some of you came and pointed out, well, there wasn't a pumper truck there, or found fault with saving somebody's life. And that's where this discussion has gotten. And you have perceptions of us, and through these kinds of discussions, we have those perceptions too. And this whole thing, Mark has said this whole thing has made Cedar Falls feel like not Cedar Falls. I've been here for I don't know how many years, but I've worked with the city for almost 40. And I do it, just like Dave said, because I love this town. And to think that elected officials or paid city staff would go willy-nilly down a road towards something just because it's cool and will save a few bucks, and think it's not safe but still do that, I personally resent that. I care about the safety of our people. I'm proud of our firefighters. I'm proud of our police officers. I'm proud of PSO. And I'm proud of all of you. You care, but let's lower it a little bit. I'm with Mark. I want to see this happen, but why can we not agree that we're headed in that direction? How can we work together to get there? And do it in a respectful manner. I don't want to see, it breaks my heart to have people come up and say, our family's being ruined by this. That's not our intent. So we've got to get beyond this, and I think it's very likely that we're going to move ahead with it. So let's figure out how we can do this together, and not put a timeline on it, but put an end. Let's get it ended. Let's get there. But maybe it's going to take more time than we thought. But we all have to do it together. We can't. We got to do it together. And so Mark's idea of some sort of task force, it's been done before. It's not nearly this controversial, but I think it can be done. And I don't know all the, well, never mind. Thanks for listening. I hope we can move forward from here.
Councilor Tiber?
Just building off of what Councilmember Miller spoke of, I'd like to offer an amendment to the motion on the table to establish a continuous improvement panel or task force to explore issues through this reorganization process, just so we can be fully transparent and open, maybe an ombuds role of sorts, so we make sure that all concerns are addressed.
Okay, so it's been previously motioned resolutions approving immediate implementation of the public safety program, including reorganization of the public safety department. It's been motioned for an amendment to add on a continuous improvement task force.
Panel task, call it what you will. It's up to the chief to design.
It's been motioned. Is there a second?
Second.
I second that.
Okay, so it's been motioned and seconded. Discussion?
Yeah, I've got one more thing.
Is Councilor Miller?
I just want, it came up a couple times here tonight that this program was intended to be supplemental. And I mentioned the other night that Frank and I wrote an article in Courier asking fire to get on board with this program several years ago. And my intent, as long as I had been involved, was let's find a way to work this out. There has to be a way that we can work this out. And what I have seen over the past 2 years is not that. So what started out as PSOs are going to supplement fire has morphed into we're going to go PSO, or at least that's what we're looking at tonight, because there isn't a way to work this out. So that has been absolutely frustrating to me. I know at least to a couple other council people that, can we work this out? Can we find a way through this? And nobody's willing to budge. And that's unfortunate. Ideally, as we talked about, I think full-time firefighters here in the city would be better, would be a better situation. But we're not getting cooperation. And that's unfortunate, because this program would be fantastic in any form. It's going to be fantastic wherever it ends up, in my opinion. But that has changed over the past 2 years or 4 years. What started out as something that was intended to be supplemental had to change because of choices that were made by the parties along the way. So that's my take.
Councilmember Harding?
I do respect, again, that other people have other views than me, and I appreciate that they have the courage to be up here and talk about this. And but I do believe that this is not truly representative of what the people want, and I do believe that it's a democratic injustice to have this vote with a special election a month away. And I know that while I haven't been on council, I've watched this unfold over the past 2 years, and I do believe we can figure this out. I do believe that we can go forward and do stuff with including people and talk about it. And I know it's hard, but that's why we're here. We're here to do the hard job. And so I would, we're going to vote how we're going to vote, and it's going to fall how it's going to fall. But I have faith that we can do it. So I would like to see more time and more people in the discussion and engaging all stakeholders more.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councilor Dare.
Are we thinking the same? I mean, I'm thinking that what we're talking about will let that, can make that happen? You think not?
Yes, I think if we vote tonight, we set a bad precedent because it's more than just setting up a task force to amend this, to follow this. Council member Miller had made a remark that it's been since 2014 that this issue's been happening. And I know with council that people speak up and you can't just, jump on the train and say, oh, there's someone who's mad, we have to appease them. But if it's been popping up for 6 years now, then obviously the issue isn't going to go away, and this feels forced, and us pushing it through. And I don't see this, especially the way we're doing it, I don't see this as personally the way that's going to fix things or start to mend a bridge. I think us opening up and letting more people in and being more willing to take more time would show a more positive thing to the community.
Any other discussion from council? So,
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilor Cruz.
Thank you. I guess I agree with many of the statements here. The concern that I have is how will we resolve the hostile environment? That's a big question mark. And going back to some of the other comments made about personality traits, working in the public sector with all sorts of personalities, there are people in my profession that are, of course, extreme analytics, and there's some that are very amiable and drivers, expressives, and so on. So you can have a firefighter with multiple personalities, whether it might be the same person having multiple personalities or 4 different firemen having 4 different personalities each. So there's no one set personality that would be, the given trait for a firefighter versus a police officer. I believe that the PSOs we have now and others coming in truly want to be a PSO. They know that our program is set up to be dual trained, and I would compare them to a Special Forces military unit. And they're proud of their training, and I believe they can go forward and do that. So with the resolution here, there's multiple ways to go forward as they choose. The city assisting with options for other employment or a PSO choice or something like a PSO choice for the one fireman that's doing the training and getting along well. Something can be worked out there, I believe. But still, at the end of the day, we got to address the hostile environment. That can't continue in any way. People have to get along, and it's shown seemingly so that it's not improving. So that's
Thank
all
you.
I got.
Any other comments from council? So I believe we're at a point where we could call the question. I'll just state prior
Excuse
to
me,
that-
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I think the amendment is still pending.
So is that?
That has to be voted on first.
Or the task force. With
Okay.
roll call.
Yep.
Prior.
I may just clarify what the amendment was. It could be a task force or panel, but the idea is just to have an open process for going through the reorganization period. So it's not just one design, but it collects the input of multiple stakeholders, just so it's more transparent.
So, excuse me, can I ask him, but something like that would take considerable time, don't you think?
It'd be immediate.
Right. So we are in the amendment, and I'll just state before moving into that, my own view, if this resolution is approved tonight, rather than after the special election, then I have grave concerns for the lasting damage that tonight's action will have on the credibility of City Council and local government in general. That said, with the amendment, this requires a roll call.
I'm willing to withdraw the amendment too if it's not clear enough.
So we're withdrawing the amendment, okay?
I'll withdraw.
So
unless other council is going to advocate for it, but in our dialogue, I not see or hear much beyond Mark.
And that brings us back to the original question.
Well, I guess I'd like to talk a little. Part of what I'm comfortable with is that even though we are looking at ultimately getting there, there's a lot of collaborative effort that needs to be put into this to make it amenable to all stakeholders. And if the original motion was just to go ahead and implement the plan without the task force, without some sort of study group,
Just to be clear, it's not a study, it's just to make the process as open as possible. So as we explore things such as, let's just say there's the 3-year requirement for training, would we be flexible in moving that to 2 years or 3 years, 4 years, so we can be as accommodating as possible. So that's the idea, within the boundaries of...
With a group like Mark was suggesting, or?
Yeah, I was working off of his...
So I personally like the amendment.
Okay. So I'll withdraw it now, but offer it after the vote. On the original motion. Yeah, as a separate amendment, or separate motion. To avoid confusion, I don't want to amend the current motion on the table. I'll make another motion after the current motion is...
You have to help me out with this, Mr. Rogers, first time with the amendments.
Yeah, so the one who offered the amendment has withdrawn it before the vote, so the amendment's off the table. Now we're back to the original motion that's on the table.
Okay.
And that is a roll call.
Okay, so the original motion is a resolution approving an immediate implementation of the public safety program, including reorganization of the public safety department. It's been motioned and seconded. Councilor Miller?
Question, are you going to allow another motion on an agenda that's already set to be made, or does it have to be an amendment?
Yeah, so that would be probably a referral to develop a task force. So I think a referral would be in order.
I'd recommend that as a referral separately. Okay. So it's been motioned and seconded. This requires a roll call vote.
Daryl?
I'm in favor.
By voting aye, 2 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. This motion passes. And I will entertain the referral. So is there a referral request? Councilor Miller? Okay. So the
discussion on creating a task force to... I'll make the referral regarding creating a task force to handle any questions regarding the program or this action tonight.
I'll second.
There's been motion and seconded. And as a referral, is that a roll call or voice?
Just a motion.
Just a voice. Okay, so as just a straight motion.
Daryl did.
Daryl did too.
Yes.
So motion and seconded, and all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? 2 nays. So ayes have it. Motion carries to create the, or to pursue creating the task force for implementation. And seeing no other items on the agenda, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
The motion second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? That carries, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for